o'clock, so I guess we can get going. Are we recording?
Yes.
We're all good to go, so I'll call the November meeting of the Kickapoo Area Schools Board of Education to order, and we'll start with roll call.
Janet Mathis.
Here.
Earl Wallace.
Here.
Isaac Wallace.
Here.
Rich James.
Here.
Peggy McCormick.
Here.
Bo Schrader.
Here.
Scott Walter.
Here. Next up, affirmation of proof of publication of the agenda.
I, Kimberly Johnson, hereby certify that notice of the Kickapoo regular school board meeting was caused to be published in the Epitaph News on November 1st, 2023, and posted on billboards in the following places on October 30th, 2023, Kickapoo K-12 School Building, Citizens First Bank of Viola, and Viola Post Office.
Thank you, Kim. Next, we've all seen the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's
I'll
agenda.
make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion by Earl, second by Janet to approve the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Next up, audience to visitors and board members, and I am pleased to report we actually have a couple esteemed visitors tonight. First of all, we'll start with Mary Johannesson from Southwest Tech.
Thank you.
Mary?
Yes, thank you for letting me come in this evening. So it's my pleasure to be here to recognize your school district for your dual credit participation. So I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with what exactly dual credit is. I have just a little bit of an overview that I'll talk about. So dual credit is an opportunity for students to take college courses that count for both high school and college credit. So you have students here that are participating in dual credit with Southwest Tech. And as I mentioned, I'm pleased to be able to present an award for that tonight. So some of the reasons why we want to promote dual credit, research indicates that there are some benefits to dual credit. The research suggests that there's an increase in awareness and likelihood of students to go on to college, reduced time in earning a degree, higher college GPA in the first year, increased persistence to the second year. They're more likely to continue in college once they start. Higher count of credits attempted and completed, higher rates of degree completion, reduced likelihood of college remediation, and it promotes equity among underrepresented populations. And I really think that's kind of true in our rural area. A lot of our districts don't have a lot of the same opportunities as those larger urban school districts. So when we partner together, we can make sure that our students are on the same level of playing field as those other larger schools. And reasons that students would want to take college courses in high school, it's going to save them money. So the transcripted credit doesn't cost the school district or the students any money. Things like Start College Now, College Up, those do cost the school district, but we realize it's benefiting the students and the school district for those students to be able to have that dual credit. Saves time in earning a degree. It may allow time for other classes or to work while attending college, and that's especially true at Southwest Tech. So our programs are set up very sequentially with specific courses offered each semester. So if a student's taken some of those courses, it'll free up time in their schedule when their other program classmates have to take that course. And the credits earned can move students up in the registration process, and that's especially true at a four-year university. The more credits a student has going in, say they go into 15 credits, they're considered a second semester freshman. They'll get to register sooner than other students with fewer or zero credits. And when I was doing a presentation in another district, it also affects your housing choices, which I was not aware. So if you have more credits, you get a better chance of getting the housing that you want as well. So some good things to know. So with that, as I mentioned, the programs available through Southwest Tech include College Up. That's our local program that has 10 specific pathways. So if a student's interested in things like nursing, criminal justice, education, automotive, those students can get a head start in those career areas so that they have very specific goals in mind. Start College Now is a statewide program that allows students to take a course that's not comparable to one at their high school. So I kind of promote that as maybe the pathways in College Up aren't of interest to you, you can pick your own pathway. So if you've exhausted courses at your high school, you can take other courses that are still related to your program area of interest. We also offer contracted courses, so if a district has a specific need for a course, maybe they don't have a faculty member to teach it, Southwest Tech can provide a faculty member in some cases to teach those courses right at the high school. And that happened at Platteville a few years ago. Their family consumer science teacher retired. They still wanted to offer those courses. They were having a hard time finding a teacher, and they really didn't need someone full-time. So they contracted with us to do some of the culinary and the early childhood education courses. And then transcripted credit is an opportunity where a high school teacher is approved to teach technical college courses. So here at your high school, you have accounting and intro to business with Mr. Peterson. And intro to business is new this year. We just added that agreement. College mathematics with Ms. Shulo. And fundamentals of chemistry and college chemistry 1 with Ms. Martin teaching those courses. So the dual credit participation award that I'm presenting this evening was implemented in the 2021 school year. And what we do, we award a banner for display at your school district along with a web page graphic. So levels of recognition, platinum is 3 or more dual credit programs with 65% of high school students enrolled. Gold, 3 or more dual credit programs and 50 to 64% of high school students enrolled. Silver, 2 or more programs and 35% or more of high school students enrolled. And bronze, 2 or more with 20 to 34% of high school students enrolled. So this past school year, Kickapoo achieved bronze level status, so we are awarding you with your first banner. 3 programs and 22.9% of the high school students enrolled. So we have this banner for you to display in your school district, similar to the conference championship banners that you would receive for sports. So we're doing it for education instead. So congratulations. If I can go ahead, I'll present it to you.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Perfect.
That's
And
wonderful.
hopefully every year you'll continue to add levels and increase in those from the bronze to the silver, gold, ultimately platinum. So thank you.
Can we get a picture?
Oh,
This is
certainly.
a great little PR.
That is awesome.
All right.
Yep. He'll just stand in the middle with the chair.
You gotta stand in the middle, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, even, Julia.
Thank you again for letting me come in this evening.
Thank you for
Thank
making
you.
the
Thank
trip.
you.
That was really nice.
Great.
Very
Yep.
cool. And next up, Chris James, who we all know.
Drive home safely.
Oh, I will, thank you.
Information on the voucher issue.
I just wanted to share with some of this information. When Dr. Annalee ran for school superintendent, a lot of some of the candidates ran on whether you supported vouchers or you didn't support vouchers. And I got to wondering like what this is all about. And I mean, I knew vouchers originally were about, but so I just am horrified by what's happening to our public schools, and I just wanted to share with you guys. This might be information you already know, but so I ran into a friend of my mom's at the county fair, and we exchanged, we talked a little bit, but before we parted ways, she said to me in a concerned tone, is Catherine attending school again? Because she had been out during COVID. I said, yeah, and she proceeded to say, do you know what they're teaching in school these days? And I was taken aback a bit, and I just said, yeah, I do know what they're teaching. After all, I check her folder, I look at her papers, and most importantly, I talk to her every day. And if I have any issues, I can simply reach out to her teacher, the principal, the superintendent, or the school board. She attends a public school, so I'm allowed to do that. I'm sure this woman hasn't been in a public school in 40 years, but she has, however, had a regular diet of sensationalized television. I wasn't angry with her, but I was profoundly sad. Sad that this narrative is creeping into our small community. Instead of looking at what is right in front of us, instead of talking with the neighbors, friends in our community, folks are falling prey to the fear-mongering, the divisive talking heads that are motivated more by clicks and likes, the drive ratings, than they ever will be by the common good that our country was built on. Statewide, local taxpayers here in Wisconsin have gone from spending $21 million in private school vouchers in 2015, when it went statewide, to spending $140 million in 2020 the year 2020-2021. Closer to home, we've seen the effects of vouchers in our own school district. Kickapoo went from 26K last year to 113 this year. Viroqua, in 2020, they paid $72,000. It over tripled in 21 to $246,000. In 2022, it was $495, and this year it's $826,000 they're paying in private schools. This year, Westby's paying $454, Hillsborough $29, Lafarge $39, Norwalk $36, DeSoto $230. Richland schools $700,000, and La Crosse over $2.5 million. This voucher program creates budgeting problems, making it difficult to predict the needs of the public schools. Vouchers are no longer an educational reform program, but rather a subsidy for private schools. It's important to understand that the voucher program was brought about through a budgeting process under Governor Walker, and it was never voted on by the citizens of Wisconsin. In the last few years, there's been tons of studies that show that the voucher programs in, Indiana, Louisiana, Ohio, Washington, D.C., Arizona, Florida, Texas is a mess. The private school, they're not achieving what they said they were going to. And oftentimes, there are moderate to large declines. Though because private schools can opt out of testing, or they can cherry pick their students, it's very hard to find a true reading on their effects. I find it hard to get my head around the fact that there's a concerted effort working to defund our public education. They actually believe the free market will create better schools. There's a lot of money being spent to sell this idea to us as school choice. The reality is that it's the schools that are getting to make the choice. Private schools are not required to have public meetings. They're not required to share their curriculum with the public. There's no publicly elected community representatives overseeing the school boards like you all. They're free to discriminate as to which children are allowed to attend their schools, and there's none of the public oversight and accountability of public schools. Over 90% of the public schools here in Wisconsin are religious schools. If you imagine school funding in Wisconsin as a piece of pie divided up between the 421 public schools, and now you add in another 383 private schools, voucher schools, and that's 10 more than there was last year, that are all receiving public funds. The slices are going to get smaller. DPI struggles to audit the 421 public schools. There's no way the staffing or budget can stretch to thoroughly review the additional 383 schools. The voucher program is ripe for profiteering and swindle. When we receive our property taxes, there's no mention of the voucher program. We are taxed for public education. There's also no public avenue for us to know where that money goes to or how it's spent. In September, a bill was introduced this September requesting transparency in the voucher program. Similar bills have been introduced every year since the statewide voucher program was implemented, and the controlling party of the legislator has never even had a committee hearing on this bill. And just last week, the Joint Finance Committee approved two bills. They approved one to remove the farmer tax credit index, and another to increase the tax credit with automatic indexing for inflation for parents sending their kids to private schools. There's no question that our current legislative majority is on the side of private schools. This last budget that was passed in the spring gives more money per student to private schools than it does to public schools. It also reimburses public schools at 33.2% for students with special education students, while giving 90% reimbursement to students in private schools. And that is if they choose to accept special education students. This past October, a lawsuit was filed with the Wisconsin Supreme Court challenging constitutionality of taxpayer-funded private schools, stating that these programs violate the Wisconsin Constitution's public purpose requirement because they require public school districts to spend specifically more on pupils of private schools than they do in public schools. Their funding mechanism is designed to destructively defund public schools. They do not provide adequate oversight for private schools. They do not require private schools to meet adequate educational standards, and they do not require public schools to provide essential services to students. There's some hope with this lawsuit, but there's much damage that has already been done. And it is vital that we do our best to educate the people of our community of the effects of this program is having on our local schools and in turn our communities. I am horrified by how nobody knows about this. I have 2 requests for you guys. The first is to encourage you all as a board to work together to adopt a resolution stating that you do not support the expansion of the school choice program, because I'm sure you're aware that in 2026 the cap falls off. And also one stating that you believe special education reimbursement for public schools should be brought up to the same amount as private schools. Doing things like this and delivering them to our elected officials serves to both educate the public and inform our representatives of our support for public schools. The Wisconsin School Board Association has templates and examples of what other schools have done. I think it's really something that you guys should consider doing. The other thing is I attended via Zoom some of the educational summit in August. One of the sessions I attended, they spoke about how vital it is during these times for schools to really connect with the public, to open their doors and strengthen communities. It's vital because for schools to tell their stories, like posting pictures like that. I mean, you guys do a great job of that on social media, but that needs to be, a press release. It needs to be in the paper. We need to, anything good that happens in the school, you need to elevate and celebrate all successes. You need to use curriculum that is related to local concerns, tell relatable stories on how education is impacting our community, connect jobs to education, and show how this is growing our local economy. Encourage letter to the editor writing. Sharing stories provides hope and understanding. This is something that can involve our entire community. I think there's a place for, we have a booster club, but I think we need a school booster club, or bring several schools together and have a booster club of citizens who are concerned and want to show their support and just help people. They might not know where to go for resources. I could talk all night about this. I've talked to everybody. I talked to, CISA 3. I talked to all the area superintendents. I talked to all the business managers. I talked to lots of our legislators. And I think we need to have public action on this because you see the numbers and how it's not sustainable. So I just wanted to let you guys all know. I have a lot of resources I wanted to share. I was going to print something out, but a lot of it is links, a lot of news articles, and just, DPI. All this information is available to the public. And that's the thing, is public information. We don't have any of that information about the private schools. There's a place for private schools. We sent our children to a private school when they were little because I wanted to be able to take them out a lot, and attendance wasn't an issue. Because my mom had Alzheimer's and we were down in Alabama and I wanted to be able to come home. And they were in 1st and 3rd grade. So I understand and I support public schools and the diversity they bring, but I do think public funds, public money should have public accountability. And people need to know. So, that's it. All right?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, just so you're aware, this is an issue we've discussed in the past, and I think it's something that we're gonna continue to wrestle with. So, good information.
Well,
And I'd agree, and I think we all realize, we've chatted about this, we need to be more vocal, engaged with other districts, and insert our opinions in the media.
well, there's so many resources, the Rural School Alliance, the Public Education Network, the school, I'm amazed by the school board. You guys probably all get this stuff. I'm like reading it because I think it's interesting, and they always talk about legislation that, and I don't want to make it political. I just am concerned about our schools, and whoever's supporting my school is who I'm going to be voting for. So, anyway, I would be happy to, if you know of anybody who's interested, they can contact me. I have tons of resources and contacts they could. So, anyway.
Very good. Thanks again,
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank
Very informative. All right, moving on then, expense vouchers and receipts, and as Isaac pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, this is really our open discussion for all board members to go through the reports. Anything that struck you as curious?
Well, the only two things I had was the roof repair and that. Other than that, I guess, everything else is pretty routine.
I circled a couple things. One, and this doesn't really have to do with the amount or the check, but $30,000 from the Helen Griffin Trust. I've never seen the trust paperwork. I don't know if anybody else has read it, but we get the money, and I don't really understand the way that's set up or how it's dispersed, or have you read?
No. You and the rest of the world, I don't know that we appreciate the money, but
Oh, yeah.
the lawyers, the trust is, I mean, I'm sure it was a huge.
Quarterly thing we usually do.
We get, don't we get quarterly payments, and
We get
a couple
payments.
years ago, they had to go up because they weren't dispersing enough of the funds, I remember that. I really don't know
So that's
exactly how it
something
works.
that's happened.
And when does this run out now, is it like 2025?
35.
35,
So lawyers handle it.
Yep.
We just
Yeah,
cash
we
the
have
checks
really
and
nothing to
say
say about
thanks.
it.
A couple
Okay.
superintendents ago, the superintendent went down and actually met with the legal team. And that was when the scholarships were gonna change and all end up at Lawrence College, or University, I guess they.
Hey,
But no, I can't say I understand how that works.
and maybe I don't have to, it's just the thought popped to mind.
Until the
I've
money
never
doesn't
seen that.
come.
And I think we mentioned this, how many students do we have enrolled at Cooley Connections?
Yeah,
I think there's 3.
okay.
3? So a little over $3,000 a month per is.
So that was a monthly bill, that's what I was.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's all I have, so entertain a motion to approve expense vouchers and
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
motion by Isaac, second by Bo, to approve expense vouchers and receipts. All in favor? Aye.
We usually, I don't know why or if it's required, but
Roll
we
call.
have generally done roll call.
All right, let's do a roll call then, Lynn.
All right, Earl Wallace?
Yes.
Isaac Wallace?
Yes.
Rich James?
Yes.
Peggy McCormick?
Yes.
Tina says yes.
Janet Mathis?
Yes.
Scott Walter?
Yes. All right, moving on then to the consent agenda, which includes minutes from our October 11th regular meeting, minutes from the October 25th special board meeting, kitchen lock replacement for the outside door, so deliveries could be made even if someone wasn't in the kitchen. The donation from Sleepy Hollow, much appreciated, a touchscreen TV for the gym, and then volunteer coaches for girls wrestling, Nikki Babel and Savannah Jennings, for boys Randy Schwartz and Gary Goot Connect. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Can I ask a question first? No.
You can.
The kitchen lock replacement, that was already done?
No,
Or not?
there's a bid in here, I see that.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't been done yet.
Yeah,
They
there's-
bid for 2,200 and some, I think it said.
That's kind of an odd thing to put in consent agenda. I don't know if there's a reason why it's there instead of in action.
That's
We're
true.
actually approving it. I mean, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's a couple $1,000s.
That's very true. You want to move that to
Yeah, let's
action?
just,
So we're going to amend the consent agenda by moving item C down to the action agenda. It will now be item D under action. Good thought, Janet. So with the four remaining items,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, sans C.
I'll second that.
motion by Isaac, second by Janet, to approve the consent agenda as amended. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Yes.
Rich and Peggy, could I ask you, when you're not talking, to kindly make sure you're muted? I don't know if that was a vote or some noise, but just a little reminder.
Can you hear me? I try to leave it on mute except when I go off to say yes or make a comment, so I
Yeah.
usually on
that's
mute.
fine.
You can hear me?
Yep,
Yep.
you're coming through fine.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Okay, action agenda, school vehicle purchase. And I think there was an insert in your folder. I saw that, right? Looks like a Suburban from Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we met as Buildings and Ground, we asked Jeff to get another bid. And so he did get one from Jones's for one.
So, I think at the last meeting, we talked about whether there's concern over the, insurance difference between kind of the typical van versus a Suburban. They had some data that was pretty close. I mean, it's slightly more, but I think the capacity of the storage for the Suburban is so much more, and they were saying how they sometimes have to take a whole separate vehicle just to carry instruments or baggage or whatever else. So if they can get that in the storage of a Suburban, it's almost worth the fact that you don't have to have that second vehicle. So I think when we discussed it, it seemed to make some sense, and the three of us anyways were.
Is this in the budget? Is this in the budget?
Yes.
$60,000 for a van is
It's in the budget this year.
We started talking about vans.
So that was figured in?
Yes,
Accounted
correct.
for, okay, very good. I'm just wondering, how often does a vehicle like that get used for?
I'm sure it will get used a lot.
Well, we have
But do we
multiple
need
traverses,
this
right?
much? Yeah, we have traverses, but
Well, and we have a town and country that's being phased out, that they said is
It's
essentially at the end of
getting
its
kinda
useful
rusty
life. so.
Not in that good shape anymore.
right.
And so they need to replace that, and instead of replacing with another Traverse, the idea is that if you spend a little bit more, then you can get rid of having to take multiple vehicles if you're going trips that are on the cusp. Which is really, I think, the argument that was made that makes the most sense. I mean, when we discussed it as a group.
Well, if no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve purchase of the Suburban as quoted.
I'll make that motion.
We're halfway there.
I'll second it.
Motion by Isaac, second by Janet, to approve purchase of the Suburban. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll just make that, I abstain, I did not vote.
And one abstention, that's full. Item B then on the action agenda, COVID practices for the current school year. And Kim, you had reached out, I saw somewhere in here, some input from surrounding districts.
Yeah, so we had our policy as, and it was identified as last year, so moving forward, Trish wanted some confirmation. I think the last time, she had forwarded some information, and with that, a lot of the schools from the La Crosse area were going with the 24-hour fever-free. Our local schools, and under the advice of Dr. Pryor here, they are consistent with the 5 days at home for those who are testing and are positive. Recommended to mask when they get back, but not all schools were masking. So Tricia's just wanting some guidance from the board as to how to handle any illness moving forward, should people test or not tested.
We had a discussion on this last month, right? And I think at the time our general sentiment was, at this point, it's like any other illness. Stay home if you have a fever, 24 hours fever-free. Feel free to come back to school. I don't know if reviewing what other schools are doing, if has changed.
Well, there was at least
everybody's-
one that did say that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I've been the thing you emailed today.
Yeah, just recently there was another school that did.
I guess what, a lot of, reading through that list, I can't find it now, but I saw it on my computer, a lot of schools are adopting the 5-day, stay at home for 5 days if you test positive. And we kind of chatted about that option last time, it's almost a disincentive to test, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Well, even the ones that say, and I kind of like the 5+5 thing myself, and I would still like that to be sort of the recommended thing, but you can't require people to keep testing, and none of those schools are requiring people to test, and even if you test, they don't have to tell us, I mean, we don't know. But I would just like it to be more of a responsible, and if you're sick, like you say, if you're sick, stay home, and if you think it was any thought that it's anything, even if it's just a cold, maybe you should be wearing a mask, I don't know. I got fewer colds the winter we had to wear a mask.
Right.
So-
I don't like the just saying it's like any other illness, I'd like to say. Yeah.
so would you like to add the 5+5?
I recommend the 5+5, but I don't know, there's no way you can enforce that either, because when they come back, did you have COVID? Yeah, I just had a cold.
Right.
So what are we approving? I mean, we have, in our packet, we have the COVID policy recommendations from Dr. Byron. Is this what we'd be approving, or is this what we're trying to do?
That was just information to guide, educate, whatever, if you wanted information from what other people were feeling. It was just sharing information.
So do we need to write something that we're approving here, or is that?
We can write that after you kind of give direction on, we want to go 24 hours, or we'd like to stick with the 5 days.
I support the recommendations.
I don't, I also don't have kids in the school, so I don't know, I just know I went to work out today and there's people coughing like crazy and, if you want to come when you're coughing and stuff, here's the mask, wear it.
Yeah.
But you can't make people do it, so. I guess, I'm just between what Scott said, treat it like anything else. Does Trish, do we still keep an eye on kids, and if this kid looks sick or seems to have symptoms of things, are we at least a
We do,
little
and if
more
we
vigilant than we
take
maybe
their-
were
yeah.
5 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
When
And I'm
she sends
satisfied.
them home, especially if they have a fever, and then makes the call and says you need to stay home 24 hours, fever-free.
And in the elementary, she sent tests home. Parents have asked. There's been a few, not many. There's been a couple families. There's one family that tested all their kids about quite a few times. And it was good. One
Yeah,
had it,
right.
and then everybody tested negative, and then one kid had it a week later, and then they went through that.
So if it's 24 hours fever-free, and that's,
I think that's what
I
it is.
guess I'm okay with that.
Trish was trying to give away tests today. I don't think we had the test by the cookies, and more cookies went than tests.
Oh, take a whole box.
We're $20 a piece. I'd take them.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still okay with 24 hours after the fever has ended, you're welcome back. I mean, I get the value in the 5+5, but it's without any rigid way to,
And people that are gonna follow the 5x5 are gonna probably do it anyway.
Right, they probably will.
And people that aren't, they're just gonna say, you can't make it.
I guess I make a motion to approve a policy that aligns with our recommendations from Dr. Pryor.
So the 5 days?
Well, yeah, and there's a list of recommendations there, right? It's 5 days after tests, right?
you say it again, Isaac, sorry, what's your?
Oh, it's,
There's a whole list of bullet points here of the recommendations that seems to follow the conversation we just had. So I was just going with this as kind of the written version of the discussion we just had, which seems to align.
I think that's good.
Yeah, what she has written, so then that is the 5 days at home for a positive test. And then, yeah.
Masking recommended.
Yeah.
So there's the motion. Which, as always, gets us halfway there.
I'll second it.
I'm sorry, Scott, what is the motion? What is the timeframe?
So, Rich, if you look in the packet, it's, Isaac's essentially making a motion that ratifies the medical advisor's recommendations.
Okay, okay.
5 days at home if you have a positive test. Unless you have a fever, then it's 24 hours after your fevers. Do you see that?
Yep, I got it, yep,
Okay.
understood.
So a motion by Isaac and second by Bo to adopt that as our COVID policy for the current year. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
I think we had 2 opposed.
What's that?
No,
I think
Rich,
they were saying
I
aye.
think
I
They
cut
said
them
aye,
off.
it was just late?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was cutting them off, sorry, jumping the gun. I think everybody was supportive of that, so. All right, then, next up, item 7C, snow days. This is interesting. You wanna jump on that, Kim?
Sure, so Marla and I sat and we calculated out the number of minutes and then determined how many extra days that was, because I think we had talked last time with the additional minutes, as many that we had. I wanted to recommend that we forgive, we have 2 snow days built in. I would like to recommend that we forgive 2 more snow days for students only, but staff are still contracted to work. And then beyond that, we still have these additional days left should we have 2-hour late starts, early releases, or any future snow days after those 4.
I'm sorry, what did that last sentence mean? If we have more snow days after these 4, then what? Or are you saying?
Oh, then we would do virtual, I'm sorry.
Well, what was the late starts and the?
So we have, so even after we have the 2 days built in, we have these additional extra days. So for
Wait a minute, okay, go ahead.
the elementary, the K-6, we had 19.31. And for 7 through 12, we have 9.27.
So you're saying that we had 19 days?
For
19 days plus 2 up here that we're gonna do something different right now. 21 more days than we had to have minutes. Why were we making things up then? And are you sure these calculations are right? I just can't believe we have
Yeah.
that many more days in there over all this time. Or did the state reduce the number of minutes? Which I
No,
don't
but the
think happened.
elementary does have a lot
Okay,
fewer
so
minutes.
let's look at the high school then. But
So
the high
the
school, even
high
that
school
has
is
9
9.
days.
Yeah.
So 9 plus 2 more there that we're doing something is 11. So you're telling me we had, for years, we have had 11 more days built in here.
We have had extra days, yes. And
Okay, and if our learning is, in our test scores, are we not thinking if we do 11 days less, that our test scores are gonna be affected? 11 days out of 180 isn't gonna affect our education?
I'm not saying take 11 days away. So we have the 2 that are built in. So then out of these additional days, I'm just saying 2 days for the students to just have a snow day. So 2 days.
Okay.
When the other districts around, like they all have like 4 days, 5 days, they have spring breaks. So we've just always had more days that we
Okay.
put in,
All right.
which has been what it is, but,
But if it is, why were we like extending our school day last year? Why were we worried about?
That's a
whether we
great
have to go
question.
more? That's why,
We just
that's
live
when I
with the
heard this
extra
last
days.
month, listening to the thing since I wasn't here, I'm like, wow, we better make awful sure you got that calculation right, but obviously double check that right.
Yes, Marla and I worked on it together. And I emailed DPI too, to be sure, because, like it says, less days for conference days. But like, so they taught all day today, and then they teach a half a day, so it was just a 2-hour release. So then she told me, no, you would put a 0 there.
Interesting.
So
And that's how it's
we've
been done.
we've always
Yeah,
had
we've always done it that
a
way.
lot of extra days, but it's
Because
just,
we needed face-to-face action.
And it was part of that contractual though too, I think.
That's how I understand.
Well,
That's how I've
what I'm
always
saying.
understood it, it was the
the
contractual.
180 days.
Yeah, it was the contractual end of it from the staff to that time. Or at least a component of it.
Yeah.
So these 2 days that students aren't coming, but it's not forgiven for staff, you're gonna pay the bus drivers as if they drove? You're gonna pay staff people as if they worked even though they're not coming to work, or?
Well, I was proposing that, I mean, it's hard to figure out what to do with the bus drivers, you know, virtual or non-virtual or snow. I mean, the only way to continue to pay them is to bring everybody in on a day that is
Right,
not.
no, and I'm not
scheduled.
saying that, but other staff too, are they gonna come
Yeah.
in, what? I
So the
mean, do
teachers,
we
in my mind,
need,
teachers are-
Melissa Weigel here when there's no elementary kids. I mean, she gets to answer the phone and do some things, but I mean, if they're not essential to be here, then,
Yeah, they don't
Why
necessarily
would-
need to be here.
I mean, I don't wanna get people out of pay, but I mean, we also, there has to be some accountability for something being accomplished.
Right.
Yeah.
In my mind, I guess it was the staff who had work that they, you know.
So like a paraprofessional who works with, like kids, like I suppose most of that would be special ed, they wouldn't.
I think, in previous years, there were some different webinars and trainings through Katie that they had engaged in.
Oh, okay.
Through.
So there'll be some accountability and there will be
Yes,
something.
for them, there has
Some people may
been.
have work and some may not.
Right, and for teaching staff, there's Fast Bridge to dig into to understand the data a little bit more. It's,
It's 2 days, I know.
yeah. So,
I think my only concern with the whole thing is like, if we go beyond those 2 days, like, you're saying that it's just straight to virtual, but I think the virtual has all those problems you're talking about, and then I think it has a whole host of problems for.
For the families.
Yeah, parents and that stuff, trying to get it on, and is that better or worse than your mental health days that you're talking about? I mean, I kind of feel like once we get past what we have planned, we almost need to take another look at it and see, what's the solution, and, where are we at in the year? How many more opportunities are, we get to a point where we're gonna get really tight, because you'd still have extra days built in there. So, I mean, I would propose that we approve this and then revisit this if this comes up that we're way past that, and start having to pick whether you're going virtual or extra.
so
days.
don't choose beyond the 4.
Well, yeah, I'm just hesitant to say that everything else is virtual. I guess
Yeah,
that's
that's
my
fine.
concern.
Yeah.
And not that virtual isn't some solution, because I know we heard that that's what the teachers wanted to do. I
You're
feel
not
like the
ready to go
virtual
there.
brings into a whole bunch of, all those concerns, it brings in a
Plus-
bunch of other things as well that, if we have to do that, I think we just have to dive a little deeper into that, and where we're at in the time of year.
I think the only thing with that I can think of is just how some of our days have gone, and I don't think we have to talk about it obviously right now, but something in the next month or two, because we've had those times where we've had 3 days in a row, and then all of a sudden,
Sure.
that, when we've had that, like, what's gonna happen then on this next day where we were before, and we were kind of in, just so we're not in limbo, but I know exactly what you're saying, just, I don't wanna get caught in between, and then everybody's like,
Yeah,
are we coming, are we not coming, or,
And that happened.
and something.
And that did happen last year, we got caught
Yeah.
in that.
To think about as far as the virtual days, we had this conversation about what is best or the most beneficial for our students. And so what some of the schools are also doing is only 6 through 12 are logging on virtually. And then the elementary has like a menu, a packet, a tic-tac-toe of
Things that kind of-
different activities that will, drive the target goal. But yeah, I get what you're saying, you kind of want to see that in a different way, I don't know.
So what's your idea, Isaac, so we have 2 days built in, and we're saying 2 beyond that. the fifth snow day, what would you like, or the fifth inclement weather day? would you
I think at that point, you have to figure out where we at with the year, because,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you, like,
Look at the,
there's gonna be something, but like right now, we're saying that just automatically goes to virtual for the rest of them, and I'm just not sure that's the right solution.
I agree.
Especially if we get to those 4 days and we're at December 1st or something like that, you know, it's like, you know, who knows? That's it, we can't, my crystal ball is cloudy, but I think we just need to address that once it happens. And, you know, obviously, if school's bad, you're not going to school, and we might have to do a little bit of this retroactively, like, what do you do to
Right.
make it up? But I just don't think virtual to fill in the gap is the right answer, because if you have 10 virtual days of school this year, that could be a problem.
Yeah, right, I forgot to be
For
said.
sure,
So,
I forgot to do that.
yeah.
Aaron, do you know off the top of your head, or Kim, or what's the greatest number of snow days we've had?
I think
We had the flood
we
year.
had
we had-
14, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna
with
say,
the
it was
flood.
double digits.
But that was the flood
the
year.
flood year, yeah.
But I think we
And
had
knew it right from the
14.
beginning.
Because we went to the second week of June.
The flood year was also polar vortex year at the end of January, wasn't it?
Yes, we
Yeah.
missed a week, there was
Yeah.
3 days there, that was awful.
And I think last year
It
we
was like
had,
June
but
12th or something.
But the year before, we didn't have, I know it was where the staff and the kids were like, do we get the 2 days back if we don't have them? Are they retroactive back then because we hadn't had any?
Yeah.
But then that didn't last very long after that.
El Nino was gonna be warm.
Yeah. But no, I think one year it was 14.
That sounds,
That was a pile.
Well, so it's interesting, historically, we've had school, 11 days more than the state requires us to. Is that, and that's not typical for other schools? You said they,
Out of several that I had asked, yeah, they said, we have, we're well over minutes. So they were forgiving 4 or 5 days. Some of them were forgiving 2.5 days and then going virtual after that. But then also, like some schools were getting out earlier than we were. A lot of them had, the spring break in there that we haven't typically had. So they've just had more days throughout the year off too. But
I watched 3 boys at Westby I went to school more than they did for their entire life, so. I'm like, what do you mean you guys don't have school today?
Well, I think-
And they never went as many days as we have.
Doesn't Lafarge only have 174
yeah.
contract days?
I think so.
Or not contract, but student contact days, 174. It's,
What's our teacher's contract days?
I think that was like 182 or 180.
186.
I don't remember, maybe it was
It's gotta
like,
be a little bit
yeah, the
lesser.
teacher contract was more, but the student number was a lot
It
bigger
was
gap than
170,
others.
78. And they switched to minutes.
Well, I'd back up Isaac on, I don't really want to go right to virtual either.
no, I
I mean,
agree.
just for the family, especially the smaller kids, even if they don't have to log on virtually.
This is really cool information
Yeah.
to ponder, because when we got into these specific discussions in the past, I just always assumed we were under some state mandate. Oh, we
And then we
better,
were like right up
we
here.
better
with
add
it,
5
yeah.
minutes to the day, or somebody's gonna show up from Madison and shut us down. But no, the state's not an issue at all until we start getting into double digits. So then I guess the question is what, and this is more of a teacher question, but what's the impact on the curriculum? I mean, they've got their lesson plans, right? And they start missing days. Is it easy for them to accommodate that, or do they start worrying that we need to be in session? Because to be honest with you, up until 9 snow days, they're mental health days, they're snow days. Let the kids go sledding, unless there's some academic impact. You know what I mean?
I would say there'd be an academic impact.
Yeah.
No, there is, it matters. I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
So the teachers would say after day 4.
well, they should, but, yeah, there is.
Okay.
You can have, and personally, having done it both ways, I think I got more work out of my 5th graders with a virtual day than I did on June 7th or 8th.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
when
it's
you get
that
late,
way. When you start getting into June,
Yep.
you can try and you can do some stuff, but I had pretty good success the last few years. And it wasn't all day, but we got stuff done and everybody logged on and they did their stuff. And is it inconvenient for parents when 5th graders are old enough? And I said to Kim, yeah, 4th and 5th grade, I think, if you know ahead of time, they can take their Chromebooks home and then they can log on You know, you can be, whether it's for an hour, or Sherry and I did it from 10 to noon and 1 to 2. You know, we'd flip, we'd do reading and math, and then we'd flip them. And you wouldn't have to do that, you could just have it, hey, here's your menu, you can pick what you want to do. If you want to check in with me, I will be on, you know, they'll be on Google. Where it's hard is because we went to class tag we don't have Seesaw anymore because we saved ourselves the $2,400. And you can't send stuff out like that on class tag. So the little kids would have to go, they don't have a device to get on. So 4th and 5th grade, if you knew ahead of time, could get on, but I think for the little kids, they can do their menu, and yeah, some parents aren't going to do it, just like some parents won't help with homework or anything else. They'd get something out of it.
So you're thinking virtual's beneficial? More beneficial than?
Yes, I think it's more beneficial than adding days onto the end of the year. What gets hard when you add minutes onto the day is that, and I think it's more for upstairs, you have so many spring sports that kids are leaving.
Yeah.
You know, you're
If you
adding on
actually
time and
have to
nobody's
take
here.
off the minute, that's the thing, you have to take off the minutes for when kids are
Right.
gone, or if they actually started tracking how many minutes we had kids here, not that we have 180 days of school, but how long are these kids here? You know, then we really have trouble.
Yeah, right.
Well, so he says virtual's okay.
But, you know, you brought up all those other things, like when we get to those virtual days, what are we doing with your other
Yeah.
staff? I mean, not that that's not the answer, I just feel like, you
We'll
know,
talk about it later.
instead of a blank check saying, yeah, let's just do virtual for everything else, I'm good with this, I think it makes a ton of sense, the mental health, I think makes a lot of sense, and then we just, you know, if this starts getting in jeopardy, I think we have to bring it up again at a meeting and talk about how we.
Depending on what, I don't have the calendar in front of me, depending on what we got, there's years when you add a day or two, it's not a big deal because it's not going into June, it's an extra day or two at an end of a week or something, and, you know, you know, if it's only a couple of days.
Some, I forget what school too, had actually said that they bring their staff back at the end of the year and not the kids for the additional days.
But we've done that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
So, yeah,
another
there are
possibility. So
options,
then
but
I
we
think
Paint.
Isaac's got a point, let's
What's that?
approve what
Oh, yeah,
we've
that's
got
good.
here,
Yeah.
and then deal with the other.
If it happens.
See how hopefully we don't have that many.
You know, I agree with you, Andy, this isn't meant to disagree, but there's still contracted days for teachers, right? If there's a snow day, the kids go sledding and the teachers hunker down and develop lessons and do some reading and research and whatnot. So just say, play in Scott's little fantasy world here. Say we said, we're going up to 9 snow days. Kids get off. Instructionally, is the loss of school time, you know, those whatever extra 4 days of class time for the students made up for by the extra prep time for the teachers? No?
I would know.
That would be, I mean, that's a pretty big number. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be hard to, you know, but, I mean, there's definitely would be, again, depending on the timing of the days, I mean, I think it would be a lot more difficult if we got into a crazy snowstorm and it's 5 days, you know, 5 days out in a row, there's definitely gonna be a gap there for sure. I don't know, that's a hard.
I think too, I like just kind of going, as much as we kind of like to know what to look forward to, depending on what kind of year we have. Like some of those days we might need if we have, or those minutes, late start or early release. Days we would need to use those, but we can kind of monitor. Like maybe we do end up using one more if they're spread out and we're like, God, the kids do need another break. You know, I've gotten an email just last night, we need to have a break. My kids are having a meltdown with, you know, from Labor Day until now. So I think it is good maybe to just monitor, to like go with however many you want to say are snow days for kids, work for teachers. But then if we get you know, it's April, we've used 4, and we have 1. And we have the days, maybe you want to say, kids can have the day, don't virtual.
And if the snowpocalypse is coming, I mean, do you send computers home with the kids? And
Makes life
I mean, can only plan for what you know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so we need a motion then to do the 2 additional days. I'll make a motion that we approve the 2 additional snow days as mental health days as described.
I'll second.
So motion by Isaac, second by Earl, to add the 2 additional snow days as recommended. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So then I assume, since that's as far as we've taken it, once we have a few snow days, we'll be talking again about what
Yeah.
comes next. You know, it's interesting, you start thinking about the possibilities, you know, Andy's input and the folks that work here is really important, but there's a lot of ways you could address that, right? Like you could actually schedule days off throughout the year to address the concern and then just snap it up. Nope, sorry, we're not having off next
And
Thursday because we
we
had a
used
snow
to
day.
do that. Was it been since you've been whatever, we had like a week in the spring with the thing that the Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday could be school, depending on snow days. And I think there's still districts that do that.
Maybe we should talk about, not tonight, but something like that because,
But you have to make sure you're clear when you set that schedule,
Yep.
because the first time we did it, the problem was, staff, we didn't know that. Well, what do you mean you didn't know that? But you gotta make it clear out
They
there,
schedule
because
the
otherwise they
first,
schedule
yeah.
a vacation or something. It's not a time to have a week's vacation necessarily, which is a bit of a problem too for families if they do wanna plan something, then you have a lot of kids out there. Don't know if it's any worse than like Thanksgiving week.
yeah, it might be something to think about again down the road.
But you're right, when we look at scheduling, maybe we should keep that in mind, but it's locked in.
All right, where are we at?
Well, we got kitchen lock,
Kitchen
yeah,
lock
we moved down
replacement.
there.
Item D, yeah, kitchen lock replacement for the outside door. Yeah, and Janet, you were right, that's something that should be action.
So one thing that confused me, like, so do we just have like a code then that they can punch in and get into the kitchen with free access?
Actually, there's this new technology and you use your phone.
Sure, but so
But someone has to
The
give
driver
that
has
other
access.
person access.
Yeah, so it's all controlled by, like, there'll be 3 of us who have the controls on our phone that allow somebody else's, through this app, to be able to flash their phone and it opens and you can keep track of who comes and who goes.
Sure. But they ultimately would have access to like everything in the school, like the kitchen's open to the rest of the school,
That was
right?
my question is,
I mean,
once
if
they
there's
come
no
in
lock
there,
coming
how
from
do
the
you
kitchen
know? Yeah.
But I mean, if it's somebody you're already vetting and trusted, I mean, they're a trusted vendor, right?
Right.
So-
Well,
It would
But you don't know
only be
who's
a
working
vendor.
for them.
I thought about that too, but we have cameras in the school, right? Like, they couldn't just march around.
I'm not too concerned, I was just, you know,
Right.
the way it was worded, it just seemed a little interesting, but
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with it. I assume it's like, is it more the cost that needs to be approved then, or what are we approving?
Did we look at multiple places or anything? I mean, I don't know that we have to bid everything, but this place is out of Waupun. Is there any, you know, and do we know, I don't know. I don't know a lot about it, I don't need to, but I just wondered if we looked at any others.
He's the one that DJ deals with other locks and stuff on. And he had just had talked about this new technology, just because it's, you can turn someone on, but you can also shut them off right away.
Yeah, that's,
And, yeah, this guy,
And buying new cores or locks for the doors
Yeah.
was going to be,
more expensive than
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with any of this, I'm just kind of like confused about the process we're talking about here, like, we're really approving like the $2,200 discussion on a door, or is it, like, what are we approving? Or like, I just,
I think it was
That's a
making
good
you,
question.
yeah.
yeah, the door,
Aware.
and the software's a one-time deal. So if you buy it for this, and if you decide you want more, it's a one-time deal.
So there's not a yearly license or something?
No, and there's no like cost to upgrade. I mean, it doesn't rely on electricity, so if it's a bad snow day, there's no, you don't have to worry about the lock not working. You can either do a fob or you can do it through the app on the phone. But it's pretty much.
So, yeah, I don't know if there was an approval or just kind of making you aware that this is what it is, what it looks like, and how much it was.
well, I just think it's a
in
perfect thing to put
Places
into our.
that take action, so I would think we're approving this.
This.
right?
Tina would
Well,
like
that's
to say
how
it.
usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think we should try to get this kind of stuff all put into our kind of capital expense budget, and, you know, if this is the kind of stuff that falls under, you know, lock upgrades, you know, and we're looking at that
Oh,
at
yeah.
a certain rate. I mean, it just seems a little tedious for discussion, so, I mean, I'd make a motion, we approve it and keep going.
I agree as an expense, it's not something we don't have to, but the security issue, it's nice to have a discussion on that, because you're granting somebody who's not staff access to the building. Did you make a motion?
I did.
Again, that gets us halfway there, people.
I'll second it.
Motion by Isaac, second by Bold, to approve purchase and installation of the new lock. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and that brings us down to the informational agenda. First item, and Marla's included the committee list there, right under committee revisions. It's reflective of what I think I sent everybody via email, but everybody, I think, responded to me with their preferences, first, second, and third, and I tried to accommodate as best possible. But at any rate, given the four new committees, or the restructured set of committees that we decided on last time, Building and Grounds, Earl, Isaac, and Bo. Negotiations and Handbook Committee, Janet, Peggy, and Rich. The slightly new Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee, Rich, Peggy, and myself. The, again, somewhat new Finance Committee, Isaac, Scott, and myself, and Janet. And then we also talked about the need for an ad hoc committee to continue some of the mission statement wordsmithing and core values type stuff that Kim started us out on at the retreat. Bo mentioned interest in that, Peggy, and I included myself on that because I'm really interested in seeing where that goes. So first item of business, I guess, is everybody okay with that committee structure? The next step then, each of those committees needs a chair, and generally it's nice, I think, at least in my experience, to let the committees choose their own chair. I don't know if you guys wanted to do that tonight, or...
I guess one question I just have is on our Finance Committee, should our board treasurer just be on that?
I'd be fine giving my spot to Earl, and then that would take care of that, if that's all right with the president who's appointing them.
I just didn't know if that's, you know, because
I
we're-
agree, I thought about that too, that crossed my mind, that we generally, though I don't know that it really matters, that the treasurer's not that involved in budgeting or anything.
But it makes
like that,
sense.
But it makes sense, yeah.
That would make our treasurer involved in budgeting, which is
So if you
kind of
wanna
a
just
treasurer-y thing to...
cross me off and put Earl there, that'll work.
I guess all we need to hear from then is Earl.
I guess it sounds
Sounds good.
like that's what it is.
Okay. And regarding the chair issue, do we wanna move committee by committee and have somebody, that way we can get her all done tonight, or if you wanna ponder, let's try building and grounds. Anybody wanna step forward? Earl, I was looking right at you when you raised your hand, so Earl will be the chair there. Janet, Peggy, and Rich, anybody interested in negotiations?
I could do that one.
So Janet steps forward as chair of that committee. Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee, that's Rich, Peggy, myself.
I was the previous chair, so okay, I would do it again and if it's okay with people.
Sounds good, so Rich has stepped forward as chair of the Policy and Leg Affairs Committee. And then the Finance Committee, that's Isaac, myself, and Earl.
You get chair.
All right, I guess.
Earl's already got a different committee,
Yeah, I
but you're
guess that
president,
would,
so you know.
that would be me, so I'll be chair. And I think that committee, of course, Melissa, you're gonna be involved in, right? I guess it is typical. And the ad hoc committee, a general task assignment to start out with, work on the mission and core values. Bo, myself, Peggy.
Do you want to, Peggy?
No, just, nothing against Peggy or Bo, but it really would be helpful to have somebody with more experience.
So you're saying?
How about, yeah, I'm saying you should, but then if you don't want to do two committees, how about Isaac chairs the finance committee? I mean.
Does Isaac's life allow that?
I can make it work, yeah.
All right, so Isaac is now chair of the finance committee. Thank you for that, Janet, that's good.
Then we work more people into chair positions.
Because I'm particularly interested in, again, seeing where that, so I'll chair that. Bo and Peggy nicely sidestepped. Artfully. So we have chairs in place. The only other thing I wanted to mention, and we had a discussion at the last meeting, Janet, you weren't there, but you provided some feedback about allowing ex officio members from the community on these committees. You had some concerns about whether or not they be voting members, and in particular, the negotiations committee. So, tonight, if we could just have a final discussion on that, and then maybe I could, before the next meeting, formalize something that Kim shared the policy.
Oh, yeah, and
With
you sent an
regards to
email
those, so-
after talking to Bob Butler. So they really cannot vote. That's what I got out of Bob Butler's, right? Right. And I had the concern he mentioned with negotiations and handbook, that, you know, we don't do that much negotiating anymore like we did years ago. But there's still times at negotiation when it is closed session, executive session, or there might be other times where other committees, for whatever reason that I can't think of, might need a executive session. These other people can't be in that executive session. It just, you know, you don't have the confidentiality of, you know, board member. So I would have an issue with that.
I agree, I mean, the idea is not that they become voting members, it's just to allow community members with particular skills, backgrounds, interests, like we saw tonight, exhibited to participate in discussions and help us craft the best policy or decisions that we can, so.
And sometimes staff, we used to have a staff and a student come to policy committee, you know, policy committee.
Yeah, there's no reason I don't think it could be a staff member. So, again, before the next meeting, I could work maybe with Kim on amending our policies so that community members can participate. Is everybody in agreement except on negotiations? Would that make it easier, or would it just be?
It
No.
would make it easier for me, because I don't think I don't know. Yeah, I would rather not be at all on negotiations in the handbook.
There's a
That's-
particular need for confidentiality there and folks to speak openly, so.
But when you say participate, I'm saying, I mean, it was just clarified that not voting though, right? It's part of.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, on any.
So it's
committee.
just,
Yeah.
so right now, if someone wants to come into a committee meeting, they're
welcome
Yes.
they're
to.
welcome to come, they're welcome to speak before, as they're open, right? And then, I guess if someone's there, you're probably,
We're pretty informal at committee meetings, as you know, so honestly, if there are people there that want to have input, they generally do. I remember a buildings and grounds one in this very room where there was a woman there, I can't even think what her name was now, who had some knowledge about something with the pool, things, she provided input, we asked her questions during the meeting. I mean,
so that's kind of the genesis of my question, like, are we changing something or just kind of making it more just clear that we want to target some people to specifically come? Because I mean, I don't know, are we really changing the policy or changing a rule with this, or just maybe just be more targeted of who we're going to get to come and participate?
Yeah, I think the latter. I mean, naming them an ex officio member, they would receive agendas, provide input, and the door's still open to anybody else from the public as long as we allow
Right.
public input, which isn't law. I mean, you don't have to allow public input, as we do, I think everybody
you don't have
does.
to allow it, that's right.
Yeah, my concern is just getting ourselves into a quagmire where like we say, we will allow, and then all of a sudden, like, does that tie our hands to say now everybody can come in?
No, that was the next thing I was gonna say. I think if we have a request or we have somebody we want, the board should approve.
Okay. so
Just
you're
kinda like we discussed
an approved
tonight.
member, okay.
Yeah, there should be board approval. Or you could get into that mess where, somebody with an axe to grind is gonna be on this committee to push some pet
Yeah,
issue they have or whatever.
makes sense.
All right, any other thoughts on that? Next item then, under discussion, the 22-23 assessment results, which are lengthy.
There's 3 years in there.
Yeah, so, I guess first off, Scott had asked to give an explanation of the test, so hopefully everybody got that. Andy and I can comment on those if anybody wants, but I think that probably gives a pretty good explanation of exactly.
Nicely put together.
Summarizes what we do and.
Yeah, I hope you understand why I asked it.
No,
I would hear
totally
these
do.
words, man, like, what's Fastbridge?
Yep.
All Mr. Midham, tell Mr. Midham, thank you.
People, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on those or anything?
What grades is the Fastbridge administered to?
They do,
Well,
go ahead. no.
it goes through, it's actually K through 5.
K through 5.
And we do
Then
s-
teachers have to help with the kindergarten and first grade. Second grade can start to do it on their own.
And we do 6 and 7 upstairs. Probably the biggest difference with Fastbridge compared to the other ones is that the other ones are all state exams.
Yeah.
So Fastbridge is actually one that we use in-house as almost like a pre-test to test kids right away to find out where they are, to really kind of look as we get into the test of areas that we can focus on and improvements with specific kids and just subjects in general. So it's more of an in-house screener, So hopefully that explains the actual test. With that, to look at it, and typically we just do it by the year. What I did, just so everybody, and I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it, but, to give some concept and to put it all in one document, I think would have gotten really wordy, but just so you could see back in 22 and 21, just some historical. We'll just really go through tonight this year's, but it allows you to at least kind of see a perspective from the past. So some things I guess to kind of hit on and just to be aware of just in the testing. Our goal is always to be at or above the state average and also in the top half of the conference. As you look at some of these scores, it's pretty clear to see that there are definitely some classes that certainly do better than others. Some grade levels, and I'm glad to see, I think as we've gone through the middle school, high school, we've had some really solid classes coming up from the elementary that some of those that have really have started to phase out a little bit, so which is good. They're overall fairly solid as they go through. When we look at testing, some of the biggest things that we look at are if you get a class that really fluctuates from one year to the next. So let's just say one year you've got 50% of the kids are proficient, and then the next year you have 10% of the kids that are proficient. It's like, what happened? On the flip side, it's the inverse. You know, one year you might have 20 and the next year you're at 50 and you increased. It's like, wow, what really, caused that? Andy can comment a little bit from the elementary. What I've really found, and if you look at this, and again, I know everybody can go back, but if you look at some of these classes from 21 through 23 and you look at a little bit of the fluctuations of, it might have been 3%, it might have been 18%. It really comes down to individual kids who are really on the cusp of proficiency. And so if you look at, I'll use grade 6 to start in ELA. The proficient state average was 39.5, ours was 36.7. That's realistically one kid. If we would have had one more kid who would have scored proficient, we would have been at or above the state average. The thing that's really frustrating sometimes is when you actually go through and you analyze them kid by kid, and you see that you have sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 kids that are literally 1 or 2 point raw score points away from being proficient. And that's where, when you really go to analyze and you see some of these fluctuations, the biggest thing is to make sure it's not a general overarching concept thing, but when you really break it down and look at it, it realistically comes down to that same group of kids who, on a test day one year, they're above. And then next year, on the next test year, they might be just below. And so that becomes that part of, and I know we've had those conversations before, of really having kids take the test seriously and want to do their best, because it really makes a big difference within that. So does that make sense, everybody? Any questions on that? The other thing to really kind of hit on that we've really tried to focus on is our math achievement. And if you look at through the years, that's definitely increased a lot through the years, which as we're going up through continues to be a good thing. So with that, I will hit on the subject scores. Basically the way that we laid them out is the proficient level for the state average, and then our school, then each of the conference schools, and then our conference rank. So if you look at ELA in grade 6, as I said, the state average was 39.5, we were 36.7. That was second in the conference. Grade 7, 39.8, we were 37.5. That was fourth in the conference. Grade 8, state average was 36.2, we were 43.5. That was second in the conference. Grade 9, and keep in mind the grade 9 used to be the Aspire, so now it's the pre-ACT, which is essentially a, I don't want to say watered down version of the ACT, but it's very similar. I did it 2 ways there, because in the past, and it's an interesting, kind of a new way to look at it, where the Aspire was always based on proficiency, and now that it's the ACT, it's based on the actual ACT score. The part that was interesting to look at is that when you look at, I know what you're thinking, Janet, when you look at the ACT score, so the average ACT score for the state was 16.2, and we were 15.7. But the proficiency level for the state was 41.4, and we were 44.5. And realistically, that comes down to, they set a proficiency mark of the number of kids, but then you might have some kids who tested really, really high on the ACT, and when that average comes out with the ACT scores, it's different than those kids who might fall into that boat of actually reaching proficiency. So it was, I see a look on your face, Jay, I know, because I thought the same. I called Kim and Andy, I'm like, I've never looked at it like this before. It's really strange to see that component, but just so you know those 2 different numbers. That put us at fourth in the conference, grade 10. ACT score was 17.4 for the state. Ours was 17.4. It was 37.5 and 46.3, which put us second in the conference. As we move on to math, grade 6, state average was 41.6. We were 46.7, which put us in first. Grade 7 was 34.6, we were 31.3, which put us in third. Grade 8, 30.5, 28.3, which put us in third. Grade 9 ACT is 17.1, 16.3. Again, you see a little bit of that disparity, but that put us in fourth. And grade 10 ACT 18.3, 30.7, 17.5, 26.9, which put us in third. So as a whole, if you look at, and ELA and math are always usually the general focuses, those are the ones that, they don't necessarily take social studies and science at grades 4th and 8th. But if you look at it, we always will be continuing to improve, but if you look at those scores, what I guess was something that was real positive this year is that we are literally looking, the difference between being proficient in every single grade was literally one kid at those levels that didn't make it. And if you look at overall proficiency throughout those levels, we definitely were there as a school. So we'll continue to look at that and work with that and really, look at every individual kid and try to make sure that they maximize their potential each and every day. In the science aspect, grade 8 state average was 47.3. We were 69.6, which is first. Grade 9 ACT, 16.4, 46.4. We were 17.2, 63.9, which is first. Grade 10 ACT, it was 17.6. Ours was 17.6, 41.6, 48.8, which we were fourth. Definitely some strong scores there in science for sure. Social studies, grade 8 state average was 56.7. We were 69.6, which was third. And grade 10 was 42.7. We were 48.6, which was third. So those are middle school, grades 6 through 8 and grades 9 and 10 ACT, pre-ACT scores. Questions on those before I go on to the ACT part? Okay. The ACT, and again, that's kind of when you look at the test, that's kind of really the big one where we're really marked by. So I really tried to lay that out in years so you can really see a historical view of where we're at. For new board members, just so you know, if you see a change, 2013 was, I believe, actually, I take that back. It was 2016 was the first year where the ACT was mandatory for every kid. Prior to that, it was only the kids that wanted to take it. So there's the change in scores. You can see the state average, how that changed. But in looking at this year, state average composite was 19.3. We were 18.1, which put us third in the conference. English, state average was 18.3. We were 17.8, which put us at second. Reading, state average was 19.5. We were 19.3, which put us at first. Science was 19.8. We were 18.1, which put us at sixth. Math was 19. We were 16.5, which put us seventh. So that's kind of the rundown. I mean, definitely some areas to continue to work at and improve. I feel really, as I look at this year for sure, 6th through juniors, we've got a pretty solid group of testers all the way through, which if things go, if everybody has a good day, realistically, kids could be proficient in every grade and every subject for the year, which would be awesome. I don't know that we've ever gotten to that point, but teachers are doing an awesome job, I think, really focusing on teaching the standards and making sure kids are being accountable, working with things. I had made the comment before that the change to mid-quarter grades, and that's sometimes more the grading, but it's just held a whole new level of accountability for learning and everything that happens, which has been really positive. So, questions from anybody, I guess, before I let Andy take over. All right, thanks.
Just one thought to mind, when the state switched, or we switched, whatever, to mandatory ACT, the state requirement, is it easy, kids that aren't planning to go to college, for whom the ACT is not really relevant, is it easy to motivate them?
No, that becomes
Still not.
Next to positive.
and you can see the scores. So we basically went from 22s down. 22 is basically the new norm is 19, so it dropped 3 points. No, that's a great point, Scott, because it is really tough, and that becomes the part where, and I'll hit on that in my report. But we just took the pre-ACT last week. It is really hard because we have so many kids now where we still have two different thoughts out there. We've got the thought process of everything doesn't have to be about grades, and we need to go to technical school, and there's that part which is incredibly important and super important. You're going into the workforce. But as much as we're emphasizing that, we're still being held accountable for the ACT. And so you have a huge portion of kids who are going out to tech schools or wherever, and they're making awesome money. They don't care about the ACT test. So then it becomes that part of the relationship that we have with kids and that buy-in of like, hey, I know you're not doing this, but just please help us out. This is for our school, do the best you can do.
Have the colleges gone back to actually requiring ACTs? I mean,
There's a little bit of a mix, and that's supposed to be phasing out, but I don't know that, even if that happens, I don't know that it'll ever be phased out as some measure of
the ACT
accountability,
saw
because
that coming and decided to get in with the states. It's still
yeah, I mean, there becomes that element of the accountability. But then that goes back to what Chris said earlier, which is very valid. There is no accountability for any of the private schools. There's no improvement plan, and she's right. I mean, there are many private schools that their test scores are not, they're not better than, any of public schools. Not in every case, but in many. And so it makes that really, really tough when you're really kind of comparing apples and oranges. And it really makes it really hard where, Scott, I think you're a good kid for school, so you could come. Isaac, nah, you're not going to be a good fit. I don't know that you don't get to come. And so now you almost get to, it almost becomes like the sports part of picking your teams and, the open enrollment aspect. But yet there's no accountability for them. And that's frustrating because they're getting the same amount of money, but they don't have any of the accountability that goes along with it.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, I was just wondering, so that can introduce year to year a lot of variation.
Yeah.
Our scores.
And that will vary by the classes too, I mean, obviously you get a class where there's a lot of kids going on to school.
Especially when we're small, because I didn't try it on here, but you used to, if it's interesting sometime to pick a group and look at third grade this year, fourth grade the next year, fifth grade the next, and just see, because you got some groups that they're always at the so you can't really compare third grade year after year.
Right.
No, and that's, Janet, you make the perfect point for the elementary. The fifth grade scored really, really well. The fifth grade scored really, really well in fourth grade. They scored really, really well in third grade. And knowing that group of kids, they were going to score really, really well all the way through, because I was lucky enough to teach them last year. When you look at the third, fourth, it's not nearly as much fun as looking at it as Aaron stuff. And we had an inclination that that's probably what it was gonna look like when the test came out. So there were no surprises, so everything that we have implemented at the beginning of this year, from learning intentions and the scheduled win time and the use of the interventions and targeted, was all to make that change from the 7th and 8th. Now I will say that the fourth grade, the 15.6% of proficient in reading isn't great, but the year before they were at 3.2%.
Yeah.
So they actually made a really, it's improvement. And the thing with that class, they are the fifth graders now, it's one of those statistics, and this isn't an excuse, but their special ed rate is 31%. There's a lot to overcome in that grade. And I don't know if they're ever there's going to be a few kids that are going to score really, really well, but as a whole, I don't know if they're ever going to, we're never going to give up on them, and we're still going to expect everything out of them, but that's one that's going to be hard to overcome. It's just, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. It's just a group of kids that happened. We don't have any other rate like that. We do in second grade, but they're speech kids. And the kids in here, they're not speech kids. And we have some really severe limitation stuff that they're dealing with. So that explains that a little bit in the fourth grade. Yeah, and that's where they were. And that's what we're going to try to do to overcome that. Same with math. There was 24 for third grade and 20 for fourth grade. And then in the science and social studies, well, so much of the reading for the science and for the test for the science and social studies is the reading. Well, if your proficiency rate is at 15.6%, that gets really, really hard. And it's not if you look in my office, it's on the back wall. I took all of the FastBridge scores that they did in September, and I have them labeled high risk and some risk. And we talked about in the staff meeting, and I shared this with the staff, and this is what we're trying to change.
See, you don't get to make any accommodations on a test for a special needs person.
Some, they can read it, some they can read,
Can you read the
depending on what it
test?
is.
If it's a science test, can you read the test?
Based on what the
Depending on.
yeah, what it
Okay.
is. So sometimes some
Even
can't.
even at tech college,
Can let
students
read.
with an IVP had things that had to be done, like
Yep.
you couldn't maybe put a time limit on something, or they got double time, or
Yep.
they had a reader from the
Yep.
vocational program.
Yep. In the state, there are different accommodations for different kids, depending on their disability. But, no, and then those are, and I don't want to make, because those were the COVID kids. That's when we were trying to figure out what we were doing. And that's what we're gonna try to fix, so. Yeah, Aaron and Kimmel will tell you, I wasn't happy to see it, but doesn't mean we're gonna give up and quit. We're gonna do everything we can to change it. And if I have to give them answers next year and make it look like that.
But it's always gonna ebb and flow with some really strong classes and some
Yeah.
that are not as strong. I do think though, going back to the Eureka Math, and this is a credit to Kim from that start, but like I said, sometimes you look at it and it really boils down to the cusp of kids, like individual kids who are right on the cusp. But I think if you look at the 2023 math scores from grade 5 on up compared to the grade 2021 math scores from 5 on up, there's a big difference in the overall proficiency across all grades, and that then becomes a concept thing and not just an individual kid's on the cusp. So I think that's really changed for the positive, and hopefully, again, aside from 3rd and 4th grade, we get back on track and there's some more
Yep.
mixes in there, and
But we're not giving up on the 3rd and 4th grade.
yeah, for sure not, but it'll all go.
But, any questions?
So, just one quick one. This is, we're getting into the weeds a bit, but generally, our goals are being met across the board. We're doing very well if our goal is to be in the top half of the conference or at or above the state average. There's a lot of green on here.
Yes, there
But
is.
each student, when you calculate the percent proficiency, it's 60%, right? So whatever exam they're taking aside from the ACT, it's.
Yep, basically if they score
They're scoring
60%, they're gonna be proficient.
And the other thing about getting too wrapped up with 3rd and 4th grade, like you say, pandemic and things, but also that not giving up on them and spending time on some of the social emotional things
Yeah.
and some of the other things you mentioned, it may pay off. I mean, we get,
I hope so, too.
I think you gotta,
We're trying a lot of stuff.
and these kids, that stuff these kids need in addition to what this test measures, so.
Yeah.
But I think, again, and COVID hit everybody in a lot of hard ways, but they were smack dab in the middle of everything foundational of where you start. So they didn't even actually have a foundation, so to speak, to lose because they didn't have one to begin with. And so that's huge, obviously.
And that's the proficiency state average for the 3rd grade. For the state average is the lowest. It's at 32. You know what I mean? That's.
Yep.
No, it's not my joke, but that's what, Sherry Von Ruden, she stopped the other and just said, they're learning stuff. I said, thank God. But yeah, I think we're doing a lot of really, really good stuff for kids right now. And like I've said to Kim, if it doesn't work, I don't know what else to do next, but I think it's gonna. But we're doing some really, really
I
good
think
stuff.
so too, but it's gonna take a while to
Yeah.
get them caught up. I mean, you're so student focused, and obviously, the targets are adjusting a little bit, which is why the extra time for teachers to meet and to identify where are they with this data and what do they need to know, and so yeah, you just target them right where they are. It's interesting after COVID, the increase in speech kids too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it's a lot of
But
kids'
that's,
speech.
if they didn't get that help when developmentally they needed it the most, it probably takes more to overcome that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Andy, thinking about that, maybe that group of kids in particular, you mentioned Sherry and, ESSER-funded interventionist positions. If you were to recommend something to the school board to ensure that we support to make sure these kids are getting what they need, what would it be? Interventionist, would it be?
Yeah, the way the schedule is set up right now, there's 30 minutes of every day where they go, and we have them split up based off of their fast bridge and what the teachers see in their classroom. And kids, and we have them kind of tiered. We need the most support, or so it's specific. Tracy does some really cool stuff. And Tracy takes them, and then Sherry takes, because Sherry's only here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so that the kids that need the most go with Tracy 5 days a week. Sherry takes the other kids. There there's also some math deficits, and when they come to me and ask me what to do, I always tell them teach them to read first, because they can't do the science test, they can't, and it's not about the test, but social studies and science get pretty hard, kind of hard to do math word problems, you can't read the word problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I said focus as much as you can, so Sherry will steal the day, sometimes Wednesdays with some of the kids and do math, to do extra stuff. What I think is going to make the biggest difference is being able to pull them out and really focus on specific skills to try to catch them up. And Amy in kindergarten and Tracy are gonna, there's a screener we do with the Fast Bridge. Amy is looking, and we've been in there to try to get the kindergarten. I know Kim and I have talked about it. It's almost like by the end of kindergarten, it's not that they can't read, it's that there's a missing fluency part in what our program has. So I went into kindergarten the other day, which I had a lot of fun actually, and I sent Amy down to watch what Tracy does, because they teach together for a while in reading. They're in there together, and then Trace takes some kids and does some more specific phonics things. And I told Amy, I said, go watch that and let me know what you think. And she said, yeah, that would be good for everybody. So what we're trying to do is, it's on my list of things to do, is to have them figure out how can you rotate everybody through there so that every kid gets it, because I don't want to have that going in the first grade. And our first grade looks really low this year, but they're not. I think it's just, for the first time, we had one person do all the screenings. And I think the way they did it before, it would make, after I looked into it, and this is kind of Sherry's idea too, was if you're Amy or you're Erica and you've had those kindergartners all year and you're doing the test, you're gonna stick up for them because you love them and your kid. You're supposed to give them 3 seconds and cut them off, but they're really close, so you let them get it, so it looks a little better, and they're just not as quick as they have to be. Where when Tracy just took them cold, it's 3 seconds, boom, next, boom, boom, which is how it's actually written out. So I think that will give us more accurate data. And I'm not worried that the first graders are, because according to that, none of the first graders are anywhere near where they're supposed to be. And I've been in their room, they're going to be fine. The point being that I don't want to have that slowing down in kindergarten, and I think if we fold Tracy into that, we can make a difference and help everybody in there.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do. But yeah, it's the part that I really like, trying to figure this part of it out for outcomes for kids. Chasing people out of the building, not so much. This kind of stuff I like, because I think it's going to work. Better work.
Any other thoughts or discussion on the assessment results? Moving on then, item number 3 under discussion, superintendent evaluation. We've talked about this since the retreat, I think, a couple times, and I mentioned that I would work with Kim to draft something, and all I'll say as preamble before we get into this discussion is, I didn't do anything. Kim took it upon herself to do a lot of research, and as you mentioned, talking with a lot of other superintendents and their evaluation metrics, et cetera. And so Kim put this together. I met with her earlier in the week, last week, whenever it was, and provided a couple of thoughts, but I think this is really well thought out and provides the framework that we need. Initially, we identified 3 core areas, and if you read this, there are 6 bullets, 6 areas that are the target of this assessment, but the 3 that we identified, communication, budget and finance oversight, and then the third one slips my mind right now, but they're in there. Leadership, there you go. They're built in there. So I think it's a nice looking tool. I'll just share a couple of thoughts that I shared with Kim. One, I don't think we need to touch base with Kim on this quarterly. You know, it's an annual evaluation, and certainly in August there will be the big meeting and write-up and assessment of goals and SMART objectives for the following year, whatever. And then if we meet with Kim December, January is sort of an interim. I think sometimes the problem, in my view, the problem with evaluations is you can focus on them too much instead of focusing on the things that you're going to be evaluated on. So I think if we meet with Kim midstream and then at the end of the year, that's fine. So you do it quarterly, it's like every month you're carving out time to evaluate. And then the other thing, there were 2 links in there with regards to the 360 district staff survey. And I don't know if you guys took the time to click on those and read them, but it's listed here as Google form. If I'm remembering right, that's a really nice tool for staff to provide Kim input on her performance. Think she's doing well, think she could maybe focus on more. The fillable form, I thought, if anybody else looked at it, seemed more tailored for board members. It was a lot of questions about board member interactions, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the Google form I would recommend is a great tool for staff to provide Kim feedback. But the fillable form is something I think we could use almost as it's written when we get to that midstream or end of year evaluation to start to assess Kim's progress toward the defined goals.
And mid-year was gonna be like January maybe, or?
I think August is.
No, the mid-year.
Oh, mid-year, yeah. December, January.
So we should maybe all take a look at that before next time or something.
Well, we're kind of late in the stream.
Commit to it, and if you think it's good, we'll just use it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
We're just kind of late adopting this. The board president will accept full responsibility for slacking off.
Well, we haven't had other things to do.
I think it's a normal process. Hillsborough was going through the same thing and he was still trying to develop it, so.
So, probably their board president. So. But any other thoughts on this?
That was good. One thing I've done for evaluations, just kind of in our company, is like whenever you have like multiple bullets like this and then you have like one score for it, sometimes it just gets really hard to like, all right, you're doing this really well, but maybe not that. So one thing we've specifically done is take each of those bullets and put a score on each one, and then that kind of rallies up to kind of your overall. And the whole idea that it takes some of that stuff about like, putting in the comments or someone's time to go through and put that there. It just simplifies it, right? You can see specifically where maybe the concern might be or where you're really doing well with something versus other places where you might need to go. So that's my only thought.
That's really good.
But otherwise, I really like the way this is laid out.
Did you capture that thought? I think that's a good thought. I saw you ready. That was good, right? That's a good thought. If there are no other thoughts then, I think maybe we can meet again and just finalize this tool, and then we'll be on a schedule. And the one little reminder along those lines though is you know, it's an annual performance evaluation, and I know how these things go, both as a staff member who's been evaluated and as a supervisor doing the evaluations. You can forget all about it for 11 months. You know, so we gotta get that done. What did Kim do? You know, try to get in the habit somewhere in a notebook or whatever, when you think about the goals that are defined in here, the specific areas, throughout the year, you know, jot down notes if you see something. Kim swears too much during meetings, which is a recurrent problem. You know, make a note. Or if you see an excellent example of communication, make a note. So we can provide Kim those artifacts we talked about last time and some substantial feedback. Alrighty? Moving on to item B then, under the informational agenda, the activity fund report. I still don't know why those numbers are negative, but I've given up.
Good thing, Scott.
Well, this looks like they're all negative, so that means good.
Yeah, they were all except for two of them the last one.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think things have, yeah.
As I say, they're all negative, so it looks good to me.
Which, what? Everybody's in the hole, so we're good.
Especially when you're $76,000 in the hole.
Who's in charge of that elementary activity account?
Probably the guy until
What are you gonna do to spend that?
Yeah, that always has got.
So, I'm sorry, a big negative number is really good.
Yep.
But why? That means they have that much money?
Because we owe
Are they
them money.
saving, are they saving up for something? I mean, he's got
Well,
a
band's the trip.
Oh, I would.
We hold all their money, so we owe them that money.
But
That's
yeah,
a negative
band
on
is a
our
trip.
account.
Yeah,
Oh, got it. I got it.
band is a trip. That's.
That's why I studied squirrels.
Oh, there's
We'll
Cass.
let you know when they're
Cass got
negative.
the approved money coming, that's gonna go big.
Yep.
Any thoughts, comments on activity budgets? Then I'll move to sign if that's all right. To the Baird output forecast, which I think again was in your folders, am I right?
And it was sent to us this morning, so.
So there are 3 different models here. We kind of work together as a team to devise some different outlooks and some forecasts for our financial future. So the first one, I don't know if it has it in the exact order, is a no referendum and what that looks like, forecasting through the years. Something to keep in mind is that the ESSER funding was removed, but none of the positions, because we hadn't talked about what exactly you wanted, or what we wanted to take away from those ESSER funded positions. So the ESSER revenue was removed, but we have left everything that we had added through those funds is
So
still
give me a
removed.
quick idea of how many positions we're talking. I know like the 4K
The 4K, the middle school, high school
intervention,
interventionist, the elementary interventionist, which is 3 days,
guidance.
guidance, part-time guidance, part-time custodian.
Part-time
Custodian.
Is that,
That's all.
so if we look at the deficit next year, 307,000, what, those positions account for half that,
Not much.
less
Well,
than?
Oh, yeah.
It'd be more than half.
what number you were looking at, Scott, when you said that they account for?
We had a
The red.
at one point,
Yeah, next year's
I mean,
deficit.
a total on it of what those positions came to.
We had 4K before, so the extra is the.
Just the para.
Para in the afternoon, yeah.
but she was actually a para.
Elsewhere.
I mean, yeah. So we didn't add her position, we just kind of shifted her.
But if we're, okay, that's fine, we're not gonna cut that one.
Oh, we also have a para this year, being funded by ESSER.
Oh, wait.
But it's just not in the 4K room.
No,
Which was
Oh,
a
yeah, it
hire,
is.
as a one-year hire.
yeah, with the 1 year
Yeah.
here.
But did you continue that one through too? You
Um,
just kept them all there and,
No, I don't believe that one's in there. The rest of them would be.
So there's the no referendum model, and then we have two different scenarios with a non-recurring referendum and a recurring referendum. And just a little background information on why we need to look at, the deficit, moving forward with the deficit, but understanding school finance and understanding that we continue to be fiscally responsible, but it's in how schools are being funded. And it all goes back to our revenue limit. And back in 1993 is when they put a limit on how much schools could ask for additional funding from their taxpayers. So they haven't changed any of the limits since 1993.
you're talking of revenue limit.
The revenue
That's when they
limit,
instituted
yes.
revenue limits.
So the limit for what we can do with our student population, the opportunities that we provide, have been bound by a limit that was set 30 years ago, which doesn't account for the inflation. It doesn't account for our declining enrollment or our property increased in valuations. So I think looking at a referendum is really the only route that we can go in order to provide our students with the opportunities that they need to be successful in life. So the two different scenarios are a recurring and a non-recurring. Obviously laid out here. As a team, we looked at both of them, and we're in favor of the recurring referendum.
Just one thing I'm gonna interrupt.
Yeah.
It's labeled recurring 350K times 4 years. Just make sure every board member understands, recurring means 350,000 goes on
Indefinite.
and on and on and on. I don't know if there's a way to end it even.
I think for the recurring, from what I read and understood, is in the language, it can end.
Oh,
Like you can, yeah.
Probably can somehow, I just haven't heard of anyone doing it. But anyway, it's not just it goes for 4 years, it keeps going and going and going.
It's just modeled here for 4 years.
It's only modeled for 4 years, but once it's passed, it's in there. I don't know how long ago Seneca passed theirs, and they were one of the early ones around here, but it still goes. And the school districts now, that a lot of them that have recurring referendums, when you look last spring, they just did another one. So the 350, say they did 200,000 5 years ago, they might now do another one. What I find interesting, and I gotta let you finish
Yeah,
it,
no,
because
you're
we
fine.
gotta figure some of this out, but, well, never mind, you go ahead. 'Cause
Can I?
All right,
It's over at the end.
and you'll probably have to help me, but in 24-25, we did dip into our fund balance, or no?
Yes.
We would be dipping into our fund balance with the non-recurring, or, with no referendum.
With no referendum.
Yeah.
And that's not a habit that we want to dip into our fund balance.
We don't want it to drop too low, and the number it drops to for 24-25 is still an acceptable range. What we're seeing then for the next year, though, that would be a place we wouldn't want to go with that 12.4.
Right, and that fund balance is there to prevent us from doing any short-term borrowing. And say we would need to go and short-term borrow with high interest rates, and then that gives us a poor rating for any future part in needing to go and
puts us in a really precarious position in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
If we ever need bond ratings, like she said, the short-term borrowing, like if you start spending your savings account. Yeah.
And another thing I think that's important to add is the 325 up there, the per pupil increase that Governor Evers did put in for the next 400 years. Yeah, the Republicans have already taken that to the Supreme Courts and are trying to get that removed. So the likelihood that we will have that increase is very minimal. So that will be removed as well.
And you might want to point out that if they look back at the last 2 years, what that was before this year.
Right, we had no increase.
Now that had, if I remember right, and maybe somebody else remembers too, but I don't think that had ever happened before.
We had some very, very low.
But some low, like
between
$150.
When Act 10 happened back in 2011, we had some years of really low increases.
Actually, if it ever happened, that was probably.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like in the politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The numbers are there. So if, I'm just gonna ask right now, are you looking at referendum so that we can do the extra taxing for the 24-25 school year?
When we look at it and it makes us nervous to wait for a referendum. So we would like to run right away this spring.
Okay, that means we have to approve this in January.
Yeah, we actually have to approve, if we run for the spring, adopt in spring 12/10.
I believe we'd have to, I believe the board would have to approve us going by the January meeting so that we can,
Yeah.
so that we can say we're going.
And then
And
you
I
have
think
to
they have
have the actual wording and everything into the DPI. but-
Oh, 123, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I think, yeah, I think if I'm remembering what the schedule said, the final board approval to actually go would have to be by the January meeting.
Yep, I see that now.
Well, I apologize for the interruption, Kevin. Why don't we, yeah, once you get back to comparing these two for us, so we can.
So yeah, the difference between the recurring and the non-recurring, taking a look, I guess, at the levy and the increases there. And the mill rates.
Or better yet, the tax impact on the bottom.
The tax impact on the bottom, yeah. We also kind of looked at different ways to increase revenue. We're kind of already running kind of thin as it is, but areas that are minimal, but we could increase our revenues is to begin collecting gate fees again. Some schools are charging athletic activity fees to participate in sports. We might have to look at employees paying insurance premiums. And ways to decrease expenses would be to look at some staff reductions. When we looked at our staffing and retirement options, in 2 years we have 2 teachers who will be retiring and will need to replace one. In 4 years, there's the potential that we could have 5 staff members retire, but that doesn't help us through these next 4 years. I think it's in 2027 that the pool payment drops.
End of 27, 28. Yep.
27, 28, the pool payment drops, and then the following year, our energy exemption,
Our bonds will fall off.
the
in
bonds for the
next year.
energy. But then during that time, we also need to look at the roofing project, the rest of the roof that needs to be completed.
We have 4 years. We have 4 years of life left. So the pool debt falls off after this 27, 28 years. that
Yes.
is-
Yeah, our final
Yeah.
payment's.
So the pool debt is in there.
So that's the last of it.
I think the recurring 350, and Melissa, you'll have to help me because you understand Allison, that builds the base for the revenue limit, correct?
Correct. So the 350 the first year builds the base. Then we get another 350 the next year. When we're saying we're doing it for 4 years, in total, it's gonna be 1.4 million in base building. And then we stop building our base. But that 1.4 million is then embedded and is there forever unless we want to. Apparently you found a way we could end it, so. I
I've
mean,
never heard that term, building the base. You want to explain that a little bit, how that comes out here?
What it does is it builds your revenue limit.
How?
Because
There's a
you're,
computation of revenue limit. What is it about that? Is it the amount of,
the amount we're allowed to tax for.
I know what revenue limit is, I meant, when you say builds that base, what is it about this that makes the revenue limit go up?
If the voters approve it at the referendum, if they approve the referendum, then they are telling us we can go above what DPI says we can have for a revenue limit.
Okay, so it's basically another way of saying that if you spend the money, the more money you spend, the more revenue you'll get back from them. You'll be able, because revenue limit is what you can tax for.
Right, so, but
So they include that, you're saying?
the revenue limit is what we can tax for along with our aid.
Right, the revenue limit is what we can tax for. And once they approve it, that becomes part of your revenue limit.
Correct.
But you have to spend it on the other, you have to spend the referendum amount there. You don't have it to spend somewhere else, but you're getting more state, are you getting more state aid then? Is that what's giving you more money?
So
to
that's a
spend?
tricky calculation because it depends on what happens with our property valuations and our enrollment. If we're
Right.
spending more money, we can get
But
more
what
state
is,
aid.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. I know it depends on, and Andy, if you know more about this stuff than I do, please help me out here.
And we,
Yeah,
No, I'm not,
I know the revenue limit uses your, you know, the things you said there, but, and I saw that in here, is that the Fund 10 revenue takes, I think it is there, takes a huge jump, and that's what I didn't quite get why the one way it took 150,000 jump in 1 year.
so on this page here that we're looking at, this output, the Fund 10 revenues and the Fund 10 expenditures lines, all those numbers are being generated from the forecasts that are in the model for those years. And those forecasts include everything from our state aids to our teacher salaries and the increases or decreases that we're forecasting that are coming.
Janet, I might be wrong, I took it as it builds the base because if it's a recurring referendum, that money is always,
Going to be
doubled next year.
right, it's
And
being
next
put
year.
into that, so then it's just part, it won't go back down.
And we don't, my understanding would be that we wouldn't always have to levy for the full amount.
Amount.
Because we're able to under levy
Right.
And I believe we can under levy, even on recurring referendum authorities. So if there came a time where if we didn't really need the money, for some reason, like say maybe if we have, a bunch of retirements and we're bringing in teachers at a lower cost to us because they aren't as experienced, then we wouldn't necessarily have to levy for that.
Okay. And we've under levied at Westwood. I mean, haven't gone up to the full referendum amount that we passed. Because we didn't need it.
Right, if we don't need it, then we don't have to levy
Well,
for
we're
it and put it on our
essentially doing that
taxpayers.
pool Anyway, so.
Well, you don't want to build your fund balance that much either. You don't want to just keep building your fund balance. You just want it to be a safe place and leave it there.
So can I, looking at this in simple terms, the recurring referendum, at least over the upcoming 4 years, 1.4 million additional on the taxpayer, right, total.
Correct.
But it allows us to maintain a fund balance and grow our fund balance and stay in the black. The non-recurring referendum is what, $3 million or darn close to it. And we still end up with a deficit and declining fund balance, right? So
Yeah, it's just that some of these numbers just don't make sense to me. I agree with you. If you look at that, this is all set to say, you gotta do this, because you're gonna pay board, you're still gonna end up at the end of 4 years, you're still, why would I do this? But I don't know, something about it, how do you end up paying more taxes at the end of raising an extra $350,000 every year than you do when you're actually spending taxing for a lot more than that. Instead of 350 times 4, we got 500 plus 600 plus, I can't read that on this thing, it's cut off, 850 plus 900. So how do you end up paying more tax after that? Now, I thought part of it might come back to that old idea that the more you spend, the more it is, like any major borrowing in the school thing, that first year you get a hit with more expense and then it goes down because then you're being aided on everything that you spent that last year. But maybe I have that wrong because, I don't know.
So the reason the non-recurring is showing a deficit in those last 2 years is because it's not building. So that first year of the recurring is putting 350 into each future year already. And then the second year of the 350 is putting another 350 into the future years.
Oh, so it's.
Yeah, your fund balance.
No. That would be saying, okay, maybe I misunderstood what you just said. I thought we said before the meeting, you said it the other way. The first year, we can tax for an extra 350,000. We don't get to add another 350,000 on top of that, and your model doesn't. Your model runs, where did it go here? Your model runs that referendum debt as 350 all the way across. So no, you get 350, you don't get another 350 on top of that. If our levy was, to do an easy number, 2 million 1 year, then they pass this referendum, assuming no other change in the levy, it would be 2,350,000. The next year, assuming again, no change in anything else, it would be 200,350,000, not 2,700,000, which is what I understood you to just say.
What I'm saying is it's building it up to where every year, so once we do the 4 years of building with the 350, we will have an additional 1.4 then going forward.
So that happens with the recurring referendum, but with a non-recurring referendum, it doesn't build?
Correct.
Okay, if that's right, explains that, but.
So from that on, our limit would be $1.4 million higher.
Higher than where we are right now. Not accounting for any changes they might give us.
Yeah.
If they give us increases besides that, or a decrease.
So it's just in.
Where does that show up in here? Where does that show up? I guess I'm just having a real hard time with that.
Where does what?
And maybe
show up?
we just need to find somebody
It-
that I can talk to get this question answered, because
I wonder-
I get it if these numbers totally make sense, but for some reason, they just don't to me.
I might be able to model out some revenue limit worksheets for you.
No, I
That
just
show
need
it
to
how it
know,
works?
I don't know that more numbers are gonna matter. I think it's just the answers to, you know.
You're not
unless you
seeing
think
it on
that's-
here right now.
You can't see it on here.
Yeah.
It's an output screen, and all the calculations are done elsewhere in the model, based on the inputs you put in.
I know it's the state coming up with this, so maybe I shouldn't expect it to make sense, but.
Good point.
So that average tax impact per $100,000 home, looking at the recurring referendum, is it just the referendum that would add, that would essentially double?
Yes.
Or does that take into account increases in the mill rate?
No, the mill rate is a product that comes out of the rest of it.
Correct.
Oh, you mean the valuations?
Well, so I guess I'm wondering, for a taxpayer, we're adding $500 a year. From then on,
From 24, 25 to 28, yeah, you're adding.
Well, not necessarily from then on, because we're gonna lose about $1.80 off the mill rate when we drop our debts.
Right.
So we'll lose a little bit when we drop our debt at the end of 27, 28, and then we lose a bigger chunk off of it the following year when we pay our last bond payment.
And why will we lose it off the mill rate?
Well,
Because
because,
remember, the mill rate has two
Yeah, yes,
things.
it
Which
has.
one's gonna make it better?
okay, so as it sits right now, it would drop about $1.80. And it's all gonna depend on what our property valuation is.
No, why would
then.
it drop $1.80? What's dropping, or what's raising or dropping? How does that go? Your mill rate can change, and you had it at the annual meeting. When your mill rate goes down, you have to ask yourself, why did it go down? Is it because the valuation went up? Or is it because the amount you're taxing for went up, or I don't know, I forget the exact way. Go back and read it on that paper.
The mill rate will go down if your valuation goes up. Also, if you tax less, your mill rate can go down. There's
But we're
always so many
taxing less,
moving,
so that
there's always
part's
so
out.
many moving parts there.
But you're dropping the two debts. so
You're
that's
dropping
why
the
you're
tax
going
from the two debts.
Two bits off.
And I was basing the $1.80 off the amount that it showed when I put the annual packet together,
So
to
we're
show what
taxing
made up
less.
the three
Got it.
parts of the levy
Yep.
that we're taxing for to make that full mill rate
Right,
of
and so we will be
577.
taxing less at some point. It's just unfortunate our timing is not good. The best time to do this is when some other
If
debt
we
is
get 3
falling
years
off.
or so before the debt would
Yeah.
be great, because then you wouldn't have to tax so much, but.
I don't know that we have to necessarily look at these specific numbers. These were just numbers that, like, so on the recurring
Oh, okay.
one, when we put in with the recurring one, it brings our fund balance up and we don't run a deficit at the end of 27, 28. And then the non-recurring one, we're running a deficit, but we're running just enough deficit that we have our fund balance, right at the bottom of where we kind of want it to be. We don't want it to go any further. So what that would indicate then is we would probably then have to immediately go to another non-recurring referendum, because
Right.
we're not gonna be able to drop that fund balance the following year any further than that.
And that's the difference with the reoccurring though, is like you wouldn't necessarily have to go to that
Right.
if things plane out, we don't.
Right, and we might actually, like Kim was saying with the retirements and stuff that could happen, there's possibility we could under levy and give the taxpayers a break. If we don't need the money, we certainly aren't gonna just take it from them. I wouldn't think.
It's usually not the best thing to do.
Well, the numbers here, to be honest, the $350K a year, I would think, even though unfortunately the tax is gonna end up higher, it does set us up better for the future. And I honestly think to tell people we're asking for 500,000 this, and then 600 next, and then 800 the next year. If I wasn't on the board, I don't know if you'd sell me on that.
But ultimately, we're kind of doing 357, I mean, like, it's just looking different.
Yes, it looks,
And that's why I think it's a little misleading, that's why I just, like, the next question is, what do you have an easier time passing, a non-recurring or a recurring? I mean, I assume people would be a lot more,
Yeah, I don't know where that
Happy to see
extra
it.
350 every year is coming from. That I do want to find out before we go through this, but before I vote for this. But you can see in the model that you really, get the right page in front of me, that what's there for referendum, where did it go? For the line anyway, 350,000, that's all that is there the next year. So there's 350, there's 350. I think you want to be careful. I mean, we can say it here, but we're taxing for 350,000, 350,000, 350,000. We're not taxing 350 extra thousand, 760 extra. I mean, that's not building on top of that. Like, you got to keep paying this 350, and then the second year you got to pay another 350 and another 350. Because if that was the way it would go, these schools wouldn't be going for a second recurring referendum. They'd be getting theirs many, many, many times over. And our tax would have to increase more.
Didn't River Valley just pass a recurring one for millions some or whatever it was last year?
Yeah, they could, I don't know.
Can't remember, I know they had one going and they just, yeah, I didn't into it, but remember it, but that's.
So you want verification?
I just want
that
some
that's how
better
that
understanding of that.
operates.
But I can't imagine that I don't know.
it's like the way I understand it, it's like a phasing in, because if you go to DPI and you look at the schools that went to referendum, they do this much this year, then this much more the next year, this much more next year, until they get that, to that amount, right? Is that what we were looking at? Until they get, to that top end, and then that just stays on their levy, or their revenue limit.
So it really is a $1.4 million increase in our revenue limit staggered.
Yeah, so some schools will do it all at once, they'll do a 1 year recurring, and they'll hit their taxpayers with that all at once. And then it just goes on indefinitely at that, that amount is there. And then some school districts kind of stagger it in.
so it's reoccurring, so it goes up by that much each year, and your revenue limit's increasing by that much each year.
Maybe your revenue limit is, but your referendum, your where did it go? Your recurring referendum amount that you're taxing for does not. It's 350 every year. So that may work its way in somewhere to something that does what you're saying. I mean, I trust it does, but it's not like the first year our taxpayers are paying $350,000 extra taxes, and the second year they're paying $700,000. No, the second year they're still paying $350,000. If we didn't change anything else and nothing changed, your taxes shouldn't have to.
Well, that's a different view.
I don't know.
Of how that functions, and
I don't know, maybe I just misunderstood this all along. It's possible, not having had one, not having had a referendum of any kind since 2008.
The way Melissa was describing building your base, it's, the way I understood it, whether or not it's correct, it's incremental.
Correct.
So the taxpayers would give us in 24, 25, 350.
So where would that ever stop? Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
after 4 years, then you're at that level
But
of 4, 5, 6.
Recurring, and then what happens in the fifth year?
Reoccurring for 4 years, so it's
And then
going
what
up.
happens in the fifth year?
Then you're at that point.
1.4 million.
And you keep getting the levy for 1.4 million?
That's what you're doing ultimately, is you're
That
raising
would
it that
be-
much over time. But the,
I don't know,
but the difference is that once you get there versus the non-reoccurring, we get there and then you end up with a cliff again, and all of a sudden you solve the problem.
recurring, you still might end up with a cliff, but you're less likely to, because you got money coming in all along, but like I say,
Yeah, you end up
in
with a
early
cliff if
districts,
everything
they
changes
have to
again.
do it again, so. And we can sit here and go back and forth, but I think what what I need is somebody I can talk to that's gonna explain what a reoccurring or recurring referendum really is.
Is there somebody at WASB that can log in, call into our next meeting, or give a little?
Yeah, I'll look into somebody who can help.
Is there
most of this up
experts,
and go.
the legal folk or whatever? And just one comment I'd make, I mean, this is really well put together. This makes the difference clear in terms of the three paths forward. Doing nothing doesn't seem to be tenable at all, or we're gonna be swimming against stream, except, you know, this assumes no action on our part to cut costs, right?
Oh, correct.
And we, for many reasons, we don't wanna do that, because of some of the issues we were talking about earlier, looking at test scores. The gains our students make are because of the people in the building, right? The only thing that gives me pause is if we're gonna lose 70 students, and that's what you're modeling anyway, whether or not that's true. 20% of our student population, or nearly, in the next 4 years. At what, given, you know, you're gonna be asking the taxpayers to double their per 100,000 tax bill for a school that's dropping in enrollment by nearly 20%. That's a tougher sell, right? If our enrollment was growing and our budget was declining, yeah, we gotta do something. But, you know, this may, the position we're in, we're gonna have to have hard discussions about staffing, because that's the
And the
biggest-
question will come up as you try to sell this referendum, what have you done
Yeah,
to control costs, to cut costs?
it's a,
But you're right, we gotta, staff is a hard thing right now, and if you look at like the pie charts from the annual meeting and stuff too, the staffing costs, that's the biggest chunk of the budget. We have to stay competitive, we're fortunate to have good staff that's stuck with us and been here. Longevity counts for a lot.
and that's a really good point. You know, Kim mentioned one of the cost-saving measures is to start having staff pay premiums. In this climate, there are jobs open everywhere, and
But
nobody's
everywhere else
applying.
pays premiums too, so with that one, we could do something.
Yeah.
But there are other things.
But what I'm saying is, if our goal is to save everybody who's currently on staff,
And if student is decreasing that much, we shouldn't need as much, we're gonna hear that too. You shouldn't, how do you need as much staff if you've got 20% less students?
well, that's the position we're
And
gonna
we
be
have
in.
to start looking at things like and we used to look at this, there was tough times in the past when we've looked at it, with like, you look at 7th, 8th grade from there on up, about what class sizes. You know, we gotta do, I don't really wanna compromise the curriculum because of it, but there are schools that, for example, don't offer chemistry every year. You offer chemistry one year, physics the other year, or whatever your sciences are, and you alternate, and then you end up finding a way to cut a staff member. Cut a staff position, let's put it that way, because hopefully you don't have to.
Well, or you get creative, like we've talked a number of times about meeting with Lafarge. Are there
Yeah.
other shared positions? Are there
That would
other
be great,
services
yeah.
we could share that help defray the need to go to referendum for that much money? And the other, I think it's clear we're gonna have to ask the taxpayers for more money, whether it's 350, 300, 290s, whatever, as we zero in on things, we decide is beneficial. But the fear, of course, is you sort of build your kingdom based on the hope of increasing your base, and it fails. And then what do you do?
That is the advantage of going in the spring. Well, no, if we don't get it in the spring, we're gonna have to find ways to cut. If we don't get it in the spring, we find ways to cut that budget so that we don't have to spend 300 and some thousand, maybe we only have to spend 150 if we can manage it, and then we go in November. And, that time we've got some results. Was it close? What do we,
But if we are looking at
That's what,
voting on this in January, which we have to, go into referendum in April, that gives us months to communicate, right?
yeah, and that one, those months will go really fast though, too, so.
To package this up as succinctly and nicely and tout all the values that we just saw in these great test scores and all the great things our students are doing after Kickapoo, and make sure that the people who are voting understand the impacts of a yes, no, and a no vote, right? So the communication is going to be key.
For what it's worth, somebody who's sat where you sat, having to go to referendum every 3 years
There's no,
sucks.
yeah.
Because if Westby, we ran it in the spring, where are we now, in the fall, and it failed. So we will run it, we can't run it in the fall because it's an odd year.
Yeah.
If it doesn't pass in the spring,
Then-
I'm glad I'm off the school board. Because it's people, it's 30 positions, not just teachers, but it will be a bunch of teachers, it will be, it will not be good. It will, it's not the end of the school district, but my fear is that it will start people looking elsewhere. Because that's where you start to, and that's where you start, yeah, I get what you're saying about, when you start, yeah, okay, we can double this and we can only take, we can do this chemistry every other year, and those decisions will have to come.
But-
We're not losing those kids in 1 year. We're not down 70 kids next year. That's going to happen at the end of this. But then when you start to do that, then people can start to look and go, well,
That's
I can
right.
take my kid here, I can take my kid there.
That's part of the
And then
staying
you're not
competitive
open
that way.
enrolling,
Yep.
and that's a huge source
that's
of
a big
revenue.
source.
And that's my biggest fear on the Westby School Board is, and it has been, if that fails and they have to cut those positions, then why do you keep your kid there?
Yeah.
And then additionally, your staff leave, which is the teacher
Exactly, yeah.
shortage.
And we've been very fortunate in that area. We don't want to lose that.
And I agree, Scott, yes, decisions will have to be made as it gets smaller. I think people realize that the cost of everything is up. In 5 years, gas and everything else, the cost of school is more.
But even if you're looking at cutting positions every year for this, it's still not, it's not anywhere close to where we're gonna be.
No, you can't get there.
Yeah, it's just not possible, so.
You have to run around.
Yeah.
Right, because it goes back to the whole system of school funding, and where they limited 30 years ago.
Where's our dollars going to?
And voucher choice.
Yeah.
Voucher, yeah, so they crippled
I
the
mean,
schools,
right now,
and we
we're
have
asking-
no other choice.
And you haven't
Those
asked for
numbers
20
Chris
years.
read were,
20.
we knew from
Yes, I mean,
our.
That's, I think, a big positive.
Yeah, it's not like you guys asked 3 years ago, you guys haven't
That's
asked
never
for 20
done.
years.
I think that's gotta be a big part of it too. There aren't, a couple of years ago, Doug had the number of how many schools had not gone, in that time we've not gone to referendum, how many other school districts were in the whole state
I
that
think
had
it's
not
less than
done that?
20% that have gone in the
Oh, it
last
was
5 years. I mean, it's.
In 5 years, right, and we've gone 15.
Right.
But that's where I think our strategy though, instead of talking about every place we're cutting, it's gotta be like, hey, we haven't done this, we're asking for this money because we wanna continue to do these things. And
Yeah.
focusing on the successes versus like.
Well, and we're
money.
responsible
We've been
with
responsible.
That we've made it to this point. We've gone 20 years without having
We
to come to
we
anybody.
almost have the roof on, we have a
And-
parking lot done, we have things that, when I looked at another area schools referendum and the things they were doing that was gonna be used for, were all these things we've managed to accomplish.
Right.
We have a beautiful physical plant because we have.
Track.
been
Yeah, you got the
Shed,
track, you got the
softball
pool, you got
field,
the, I mean,
The
there
energy
isn't,
efficiency stuff we did without a referendum.
yeah, there's nobody that has accomplished.
We did it without a referendum, but they have to pay for it.
That's true, that's true.
So we want to be careful.
Uh,
And that's to be careful too, because we've gotten feedback at Westby, why didn't it fail? And they said, well, we gave you all kinds of money. Well, they did, but it was for safety entrances, it was for things that they built, and people are like, well, we just gave you money. So that's part of our messaging for the spring is, that's different. You gave us money to build things.
Right.
We just need money to run the stuff in those things we built. And that,
So that's
Keep
an
that in
important
mind.
distinction to make
Yes.
too here after the pool. This is a referendum for operations, right?
not building anything, just
Yep.
keep that in mind. And Steve I'm sure you'll talk to Steve, he has gotten some really good feedback from community members about how they want information presented to help pass.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
And actually, and I haven't looked recently, but that referendum database, if we look at it, I'll bet the referendum numbers for recurring referendums, this 350,000 is not even gonna be in the
That's
top
nothing.
half if you, I mean, even if you looked at smaller schools, I mean, some of the ones I looked at last spring when I was looking at them were, wow, you know, I know about how big that school is, and that seemed like a lot, so.
Yeah, it doesn't, you're right, in comparison, it's not much, but you still look at, it's doubling property taxes, and we always talk about the fact that 2/3 of our kids are in.
Yeah, but you're looking at this year though, I mean.
Right, it's not,
Look back a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then compare it. It's not, we're not doubling taxes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
true.
historically.
That's very true.
And that would be a good point to get, to make sure we go back at least this far and look back the year before that and see that, yeah, that's a really, it kind of feels like this, we need to keep track, keep in our mind that we need to use.
That's a really good point, and that's gotta be, I think, a key part of the
Yeah,
communication.
so we need a little more historical, just.
They're gonna wanna know what the
line.
impact is.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's probably not the 500, the double.
But on the taxpayers' frame of mind, we also have to remember that, we're gonna get their tax bills in December, and our taxes are probably, school taxes are probably going up, at least where I am. And I just heard a really scary thing this weekend about the Richland County taxes, for those of us who live in Richland County, are way going up. I don't know if they're not limited by a revenue limit or any percentage, or they can go borrow money for whatever they want, but.
That goes down on balanced budget for next year, so how are they gonna get it without?
They borrow money, that's how they
Does that
get
have
it.
something to do with that thing that shared revenue talk that was going on in the spring? I'm not exactly sure what all that is for them.
Yeah, and Richland County is, yeah, they have some.
I mean, is that why we're
very
gonna get
little,
taxed
yeah.
higher?
And
in Richland County?
what John looked at, it looks like Bloom and Forest are the highest,
So-
most as far as value.
Oh, yeah.
In the whole county.
It's 9:30, maybe we can wrap this up, but I think we're all kind of in agreement. We're going to referendum. Some things to verify in terms of how this base is built. But maybe, well, if we gotta approve something in January, as I recall too, there's a real strict timeline in terms of the lawyer drafting, well, you got all that.
Yeah, and you're already in whatever with an attorney with, I'm assuming, what's their names that did the pool referendum, will write this one too. But they should be aware of what we're looking at already, so if we're pretty well think this is where we're going, I mean,
We can start.
these models always look scary, I will say. They always look scary. They used to try to go out further, but it just gets worse and more iffy, so it's probably good they only go 4 years. And, you know, and I pretty well trust what the models are, I just want to kind of get a better understanding of.
I don't trust the model at all. I
But
feel
you almost
like
have to
that
know.
model, they're throwing darts at the wall personally, but.
Well, the early ones really were, because nothing was ever as dire as they came
Well,
out.
early ones are
Now
always
they're-
are because we don't know anything yet. But as the state puts things together for us, then it really dials in. So that's why, once Sandy and I got together, once we had all the numbers from the state, everything for 23, 24 was tight. Well, now that's the model I'm working off of with the percentages in there for increases or decreases in various things across the next 4 years. And we also know what the state's doing for next year because they already told us. So that helps.
Right.
But that helps
See,
with
you're
some
after
of it.
that, that gets a little dicey.
Yeah, definitely.
But as you go out, you don't know.
Well,
Student
that's-
counts can
That's what he
change.
did.
Property valuations may not come in where they're
Yeah,
projected.
maybe if we're lucky, and I think you've been realistic here, I was glad to see that. I don't like to see the number of students going down, but I think if we're gonna do a model, we don't wanna put on some rose-colored glasses and model that.
Let's hope our model is a little more pessimistic than reality.
And I think we
We're
were
better
up,
off.
we were actually, I think we're up 21 students from what our original, what we were using was from what was predicted. I think we were predicted at like 450 this year, and we were at 471 or 472.
Oh, wow.
So
But that doesn't turn into the membership FTE though.
Yeah, I gotta remember, is that what they get the
That's
three-year
that's
average?
that count,
Kids
right, of
only, yeah.
students enrollment.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't fund us on that.
All right,
But it's nice because it helps with FTE.
thanks for putting that
Yeah,
together.
thanks.
Melissa and Kim, I
Thank you.
assume you guys,
And Alice.
and Alice, thank you, collaborated on that. We're gonna be looking at more tables and charts, I'm sure, moving forward, but you've got that timeline?
I've got the
You know
timeline,
the
and I will get
dates.
somebody in here next time so that we have
Okay,
clarity in moving forward, that we can speak.
okay.
Because
Right.
when we initially also have, and there's gonna have to be some extra meetings right off the bat once we approve this, because we do need to get on the same, everybody, get on the same page with what the points that are gonna be used, what are we gonna, how are we gonna.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad
Present this.
idea to brainstorm ahead of, so we don't, you know, we're not here till midnight, you know?
Definitely,
We could
that's,
sit
yeah.
and just,
yep,
these are the things that we've done to save money, these, the starting.
these are the no right thing that Isaac pointed out, I think that's a good one, but there might be others. And-
All right, I'm gonna draw that discussion to a close, because there's gonna be a lot more to come. Last item under informational, schedule of meetings. We have a policy committee meeting.
We do need to schedule one, correct?
So who's on that? It's now the Policy and Legislative Affairs
Rich, Peggy,
Committee.
and you.
Yeah, they meet in, so, I mean, we can email, but if I would throw out there 20 November, so a week from this coming Monday, I guess that's the week of Thanksgiving, but if you guys are available that day, then we can try to work out time, or I can send an email and time to work for you, and we'll just work through it, work it out.
That, I know that day works, after dark would be nice.
That'd be
Already
4
have
o'clock.
shot, but, yeah.
You know,
After sundown.
5:30, it's not gonna be that late, but. What's that?
I can make any time work that day.
Yeah, 5 would be good. Gun
For
season.
Peggy, it was 5 o'clock on Monday the 24th for you.
Yeah, that works for me, Peggy. And what, do we have some updates that need to be?
Yes, we do. We have a
Okay.
number of policies that need to be reviewed.
So we've got some grunt work to get through, policy updates, but with the new slant for that committee, and Rich, you're the chair, but maybe this goes for at least one of the other committees. When you think about meetings in the past, for all of our committees really, meetings have been convened as need arose. But for a couple of the committees now anyway, instead of responding to things in the school, there's a chance to respond to things that are happening outside the school. So it'd be nice if we got those committees together on some, whatever the committees want, you know, quarterly or whatever. But that Legislative Affairs Committee, like Chris eloquently pointed out, there's crap happening that's killing public schools. And it's that committee that can review that stuff, pull together news articles, communications with legislators, you know, draw together multiple schools to support some objection to the insanity in Madison. But at any rate, I just wanted to point out that, you know, there's a role for those committees now beyond just reacting to needs that arise within the school. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, and so, yes, absolutely, so that absolutely makes sense to me, and in fact, for the one on the 20th, besides, you know, the policy stuff we have to look at, depending on how much that is, I can have some information on the legislative stuff too, and maybe look into if we wanted, you know, some type of resolution or whatever the right way is to, you know, start trying to counteract some of the stuff. We could have some of that discussion there.
Yeah. All right, so November 20th at 5 o'clock, did we say?
Yep.
All right, moving on to the superintendent's report.
So So Steve Stalker will be providing training on best practice to clean the gym floor. He'll be coming in next week so that we are treating that as well as we can. Jeff, our floor 360 pool man, is going to come in over the holidays to repair those tiles that we had talked about a few months ago. The 3K program, Sam Muller's done a great job of getting the room set up and getting some dramatic play areas. We've had a really great response thus far, expecting more than 10, and we haven't even had the first day yet. And been meeting with Megan and Brandon, trying to establish a timeline and plan for a reunification for school safety. That will be on January 22nd, along with some other staff in-service options that Allison and Melissa and I are working on. And other than that, just attending meetings. Was at the PAC meeting where we talked a lot about the AI and how to incorporate that into schools and responding to how students are using that platform. So that's about all I have this month. Are there any questions for me?
You didn't give me time to.
Did you?
Principal?
We had Books for Breakfast again on Friday, was very well attended, had people in. Monday, I went to CISA with Mrs. Aggie and Mrs. Stinson and Mrs. Breedebeck and Mrs. Strader. And we went to a thing called, it's EMSS, so like Equitable Multi-Leveled Systems of Support, which is a fancy-dancy way of saying we're trying to take all of the special things that we're doing for kids and put it into one coherent, organized system. So you've heard me talk about the tiers of how we're trying to use different tiers of remediation for kids at different levels of academics. We also have the same thing set up with behaviors, so we meet once a month. We have a group that meets for behaviors where we talk about the kids and what we're trying. It was kind of nice because we were able to sit down and actually, it's also hanging in my office, is we were able to map out, we're doing a lot of really good things. Now what we're trying to do is focus those things so that we're being more specific in exactly what we're doing for the kids that need help behaviorally and how that wraps up into their academics. So like when we said about the report card, everything we're trying to do is get better results for kids. That was another step in that process to help us organize that. And little did I know, they also are going to come meet with us, which when I signed that up, I thought it was a one-day thing, but they will come. He's like, we'll come 7 times. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know if I want you here 7 times. He's like, dates? I'm like, just send me an email. So they will come and work with us. And we can kind of pick behaviors, academics, which part we want to work on to make sure that we have those tiers and everything is set up. But Katie and Angie have been a huge resource for me in helping me try to understand that. I've learned a lot, just big picture of how it all goes together, as have Taylor and Erica, who work really well with those kids and trying to make some, we're not going to get the academic outcomes we want until we help some kids learn how to handle their behaviors. So that's what we're doing. That's all I got. Questions, I guess I should ask.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, parent-teacher conferences were tonight and tomorrow. I think response is always still good at the elementary.
Yep.
It's less at the middle school, high school, just over the years, I think. Parents have easy access to see report cards all the time, and so they kind of know how kids are doing, and if there's no concerns, it kind of changes it, but still gives parents an opportunity to come in. Tomorrow is the Veterans Assembly, which we host every year. It's always a great event to honor the veterans. I think this year it's a little, I don't want to say different, but we actually have a former student that will be speaking. He's a teacher now, Matt Fortune, so he's going to be the speaker tomorrow. And Sam Edel is also, I don't know if you remember from last spring, but he was the state Voice of Democracy speech winner and went on to Washington DC to give his speech, so he's actually going to give his speech too. So that'll be cool. Next week, Mrs. Eggy and Mrs. Goodrich and myself are going to go and take a tour of the Challenge Academy at Fort McCoy. We haven't had any kids that have gone there in a long, long time, but they've kind of revamped some things and want schools to get in. And as we look at kids and some of the needs that we have and opportunities and where things are at, we just kind of want to go check it out to see where things are at and how it works. So hopefully that will be a good opportunity and learning opportunity. I had sent an email to the board about the presentation that Mrs. Goodrich had given at the School to Work in Riverdale. I think it was really good for us. I mean, we talk about highlighting our school and lots of schools there, and we got a call the next day that we looked really good. So I think she did an awesome job. I think it was good. Definitely focuses on that school to work component that we have with our kids and the ability to learn more on that and work with local businesses, but also highlight what we do as a school. And the last one is if everybody gets an opportunity in the next few days to go to the musical. So it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They had the preview today. Every time I go and watch just to see what Catherine does with the kids and everything is just, it's awesome. So it's, Greg and everybody that helps out in the pit band, but it's just, I think it's always a great opportunity and they do awesome things. So if you can go, I would suggest it. So. Any questions? All right, thanks.
Very good, thanks, Aaron. Next, we need to move to closed session. According to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, paragraph 1, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The purpose is volunteer football coach and a part-time part-time speech teacher.
Happy New Year.
I'll make a motion to convene in closed session.
Second it.
Moved by Earl, second by Janet to convene in closed session. I think we need a roll call vote.
What's that?
Rich James,
Yes.
Peggy McCormick,
Yes.
Cole Schrader,
Yes.
Janet Mathis,
Yes.
Earl Wallace.
Yes.
Isaac Wallace.
Yes.
Scott Walter.
Yes.